Hong Kong lowers its voice when it rains. The harbor smooths to graphite, the towers soften to ideas, and light learns manners on wet metal and glass. If you're here to sleep, let the ferries and the weather count time for you. No numbers, just small notes. If you're here to work or read, keep the pace of the city at walking speed. Steady, unhurried, exact. We all begin where land becomes water and people become passengers, under the green roofs and pale lamps of the Central Ferry Piers, while the harbor writes its long, patient sentence beneath everything. Rain arrives as a finer grain on the air, a cool adjustment rather than a decision. The ferry piers accept it with the ease of places that have practiced weather. Roofs tick in bright, close syllables. Gutters thread water toward the edge and let go in measured curtains. Between pillars, the harbor shows itself as a broad. Low breath dimples closest stitching, a mild lift where a workboat has passed, a silk of diesel and brine rounded down by rain. I take the outer edge of the concourse and rest a palm on the rail. Stainless steel returns a precise chill, beaded in neat ranks that consider and fall. Each drop lands with a small note against painted wood, then joins the harbor's hush. Inside the hall, bilingual signs glow softly through misted panes, characters and letters both read calmer under weather. A timetable case wears a crown of droplets. One bead grows to a pearl and draws a clear line through condensation before the fog mends the path in seconds. The pier has its own orchestra. Rope tensions speak in low vowels where fenders kiss the hull. Chains on bollards release a silver fringe when the wind remembers itself. Above, the roof ribs keep a bright, quick drum. Below, water on water keeps the bass. A distant bell carries across the channel as persuasion rather than command. When a ferry nudges the pontoon, the floats answer with a rounded thump you feel through the deck steady, friendly, never sharp. Footsteps arrive and soften. Wet solace find the smooth concrete, write commas, and move on. The card reader blinks a courteous green. The beep it gives is modest and complete, more acknowledgement than announcement. The queue settles into the harbor's tempo. Umbrellas tilt and correct. Shoulders relax by a degree, voices round down into texture. If you're drifting toward sleep, you can borrow this line exactly tilt correct. Gather, release. If you're working, treat each column along the pier as a waypoint, one small task from pillar to pillar, then glance out to the water and continue. A gull idles in the lee of the roof, shakes a quick galaxy from its feathers, and lets the rain remake the air. The smell here is particular to night clean salt, warm rope, a softened thread of engine that arrives as feeling before it becomes sound. The harbor's surface near the piles shows a handwriting of eddies and dimples then blurs. As a curtain falls from the gutter lip, 100 bright almonds in one soft pour over in a breath, remembered by the rings they leave behind. I move closer to the gate where the green and cream ferry breathes in place. Rain polishes the paint without glare. The name along the bow reads truer for being wet. Inside the waiting hall, ceiling fans make a slow ceremony of air. Benches shine like lacquer. Beads line each slat and drop in orderly turns. A clock above the turnstiles keeps its own calm. Time feels less like counting and more like agreement. When a loudspeaker clears its throat, even the chime sounds wrapped in felt. Words follow in two languages, and both are kind through rain. If you're here to sleep, this is an easy room to close your eyes in. Roof tick above, harbor hush below, a beep now and then to mark the passage of gentle minutes. Breathe with the ferries, float, settle, float, settle. If you're here to focus, copy the pier's engineering. Simple spans, clear sight lines, stress taken by the places built for it. One paragraph per span. One check at the rail. Continue. Back out on the outer walkway. The harbor widens and the skyline becomes an idea written in lights. Towers lose their edges and keep their intention. Reflections slide down gloss and repeat themselves in the water, where rain edits them into soft columns that tremble and then stand. A tram bell on Devere Road reaches the pier as a memory. Bus tires turn wet asphalt into lace. And then forget it. All of it folds into the same fabric the harbor has been weaving since we arrived. At Pier No. 7, the hull's long windows frame the channel like a moving painting. Two ferries trade positions with practiced courtesy, their wakes unrolling as neat ribs that lift the pier by a finger's width and set it back. Along the handrail, beads align as if counted. 1, 2, 3 tick. 1, 2, 3 tick. On the floor, a trail of darker prints leads to the gate, each step drying at the edges first, then from the center, leaving an ellipse that contracts until it is only floor again. Rain finds every material and gives it a voice. Corrugated roof bright whisper, painted timber round tab, rubber fender soft kiss, harbor water low consonant that never ends. Even air adopts a timbre, cooler by a degree near the gate, warmer by a degree under the eaves where people stand a visible breath, where steam slides out from a small food stall curls once and agrees to become weather. The stall's sign glows tea-colored in the rain. The glow doubles in a puddle at the threshold and wavers when a bead lands near its center. A family folds their umbrellas before the turnstiles. Drip rhythms change key as the fabric shakes and settles. A commuter steps through with the economy of someone who has made this crossing for years. Coat storing a soft map of the weather on the shoulders. The ferry guard touches the rope with a palm, reads its tension, and nods an entire conversation in one gesture. The rope pays out a few centimeters, then stops, precise as a closing quotation mark. Look down, and the harbor has its own small theaters. Between piles, a star of foam appears and dissolves. Beneath a light, fish lift the surface by less than a breath, leave coin-sized rings that slip under the pier and reappear on the far side with their shape intact. Rain writes punctuation above them, ellipses where drops cluster, commas at the edge where heavier fall brings a bigger note, dashes when a gust draws diagonal lines across the channel and then rests. If you want to be guided into sleep, choose one detail to keep until it lets you go. The rail bead that almost doesn't fall. The green blank on the reader, the slow ribs of a wake sliding from the ferry's flank to the piles and back to the open water. If you want to be guided into work, choose 2. The roof's bright drum for starting, the harbor's low vowel for continuing. Everything else can be decoration. A final check before boarding. The city behind us is a softened circuit of promise. The island across the channel is a soft dancer. Between them, the ferry repeats its quiet pulse engines idle low. Mooring line is straight thought, rain correcting edges with patience. A bell will mark the change when it's time. Not yet. For a moment longer, the pier keeps the room. The harbor keeps the time, and the rain keeps the language that both understand. The hall at Pier No. 7 holds the weather the way a calm room holds a conversation. Light comes in washed and even through lone panes, and rain writes vertical gloss across the glass, so the harbor outside looks like a painting that breathes. The green and cream ferry waits with the patience of something designed to repeat a kindness. Its ropes are straight thoughts. Its fenders speak in soft rubber vowels whenever the hull remembers to lean. Inside the floor is a clean gray ribbon. Footsteps arrive as commas and then learn the hall's hush. Wooden benches, dark, honest, wear thin rows of beads along each slat. Every few seconds, a bead at the lowest edge grows brave and falls with a small wooden tick. On the ceiling, slow fans make ceremony out of air. Their blades collect a fine wetness that turns each lamp's halo into a soft coin. Then the fans turn and the coins move, and the hall becomes a slow constellation. Timetables sit behind glass with rain crowns at the top edge. The letters are calm. Central, Tsim Sha Tsui. Minutes counted in a way that feels like arrangement rather than demand. A bead bulks to a pearl, draws one clear path through the condensation, and the route line below sharpens as if the city had chosen to explain itself for a breath. Then the fog mends the line, and the explanation returns to suggestion. Turnstiles wait in a tidy row. A contactless reader blinks a patient green. When a card meets it, the beep is modest in complete acknowledgement, not applause. One by one, umbrellas fold into bouquets and tap a little drumline on the floor, nylon speaking in bright consonants. Canvas and rounder ones. Close by, a sign in 2 languages reminds more than instructs. Rain makes both scripts kinder. At the gangway, rope hawsers run through a metal eye, and the eye writes a soft, regular whisper under the weather rope, thinking out loud. The pontoon breathes a low, rounded thump underfoot each time the harbor remembers a boat that passed a minute ago. Between those small thumps, you can hear the ferry's engines idle as a gentle purr. The rain immediately smooths into fabric. If you're drifting towards sleep, you can use the sequence exactly. Whisper, rope, thump, float, purr, engine, and let your breath meet each one in turn. If you're working, use the columns along the hull as your waypoints, 1 paragraph per column. A glance to the water, continue. A bell speaks once from the ferry, rounded, persuasive, not urgent, and the hull accepts the syllable the way a page accepts a period. The gate slides with a friendly felted scrape. Passengers arrange themselves without instruction. A small family. A commuter whose coat keeps the map of rain on its shoulders. A pair of friends who discuss something too gently to disturb the harbor. A staffer touches a mooring line with 2 fingers, reads the tension, and nods. The line gives exactly as much as it should and no more. Look down and little theaters appear. Along the skirting board, beads march in even files, some choosing to drop in pairs, tick, tick, rest others preferring singles. At the window mullions, tiny runnels meet and part like conversations that have known each other for years. A narrow puddle under the bench holds half a lamp and half a shoe. When a drop lands in the center, the half lamp becomes a ring and then remembers to be a lamp again. The announcer clears its throat. 2 notes, soft, then words that arrive dressed and felt. The languages alternate, the meaning stays kind. Boarding, safety, welcome. As people pass the gate, each step prints a darker ellipse on the deck boards, and the rain begins to lighten it from the edges inward, an erasing that happens without hurry. A stroller wheel clicks once at the threshold and finds the rhythm of the ferry. A suitcase handle makes a short, contented creak and stops. Outside on the covered platform, the harbor is closer. Beads on the handrail align like disciplined notes. One leans, falls, strikes the painted plank with a rounded syllable, and becomes harbor. In the gap between pier and hull, water practices calligraphy with the drops that fall from the roof, circles that expand until they slide under the ferry's side and appear on the far side, still circles, still themselves. A gull uses the lee to hover for one long heartbeat, shakes a silver handful from its feathers, and moves on. If you're listening for sleep, narrow your world to one corner of the hall. The timetable's crown, the turnstile's green, the bench's beadwork, the fan's gentle punctuation. Keep only those. If you're listening for focus, keep 2. The bell's single syllable as a start signal, the rope's soft whisper as your through line. The rest is weather doing perfect work. We hover a moment near the ticket window, even if we don't need a ticket. The glass fogs and clears in squares where warm air touches cold. A hand leaves a brief, human shape in the condensation forefingers and a thumb that become cloud again in seconds. A small clock above the opening keeps the kind of time that cooperates with rain. A pencil behind the glass has absorbed enough damp to look softer than graphite, and the small tray at the base wears 3 clear beads that refuse to join and refuse to fall. Back at the gate, the staffer glances once at the harbor, once at the rope, once at the deck, and opens the last latch. The ferry slides a hand's breadth toward the pontoon, settles, and waits. The line of passengers shortens without becoming a rush. A final umbrella decides not to close, shakes once, and becomes a polite drip at the hem. The reader beeps its last beat before departure and rests. Wind remembers itself and turns the rain by a few degrees. Inside the lamp halos, drops become visible wires for 10 seconds, bright diagonals, then resume their invisibility. The hall takes the change without remark. The ferry exhales, a tone low enough to feel through shoes, and the mooring line gives a small, exact slack as if agreeing. That's all the ceremony there is, and it's exactly enough. When the ferry door closes, the pier keeps the echo soft. Wooden afterward, then goes back to its original paragraph. Roof tick, harbor hush, beadwork, fan. If you're staying behind, this is a good room to wait inside and let the next crossing become your next thought. If you're boarding, this is a good threshold to breathe on one long inhale with the bell, one long exhale with the rope's whisper before stepping into the ferry's interior light. The ferry accepts us the way a room accepts rain, without ceremony, with perfect intention. The door closes and the harbor becomes a framed sound. Engines turn from idle to purpose, a low, cotton-padded thrum that fills the boards through your shoes more than your ears. Ropes slip free with a small, satisfied whisper. A bow marks the moment rounded, never sharp, and we begin to slide. Inside, light is domestic. Pale bulbs make coins on varnished benches. Those coins repeat in the wet along the window frames, then drift down the glass as slow comets. The wood smells like a long story salt and polish, sun from other days folded into tonight's weather. The cabin breathes in 2 registers, engine thrum below, roof tick above. Between them sits a soft, constant conversation of windows, drops forming, joining, drawing clear paths through condensation, then allowing the fog to mend itself. We move sideways first, as ferries do, then face the channel. The harbor surface tightens into fine stipple around the bow, and a fan of dimples runs ahead as if clearing a page. Through the green-painted frames, Hong Kong writes itself in softened vertical central towers, losing their edges and keeping their light. The tallest glow like patient lanterns. Smaller buildings add a dot pattern that rain rounds into kindness. In each pane, a different city, one full of gold, one mostly jade, one that's just graphite and breath. The cabin's rhythm is easy to borrow. If you're drifting toward sleep, thrum and tick out, quiet, rest. If you're working or reading, 1 paragraph per window post, look up on the bell's memory, continue. Either way, the ferry sets the pace and keeps it for you. A staff member makes a short walk down the aisle, soft heel, soft toe, and checks a latch with a practiced hand. The latch answers with a felted click. A child counts raindrops on the pane until the numbers turn into light. A commuter closes their eyes and lets the engine count instead. The ceiling fans turn at the rate of reasonable thoughts. Each blade carries a thin gloss that turns lamp halos into slow-moving moons. Windows behave like weather lessons. A drop swells at the top edge, leans, becomes a clear thread that pulls a skyline into focus, then widens and loosens until the city becomes suggestion again. Another drop chooses to stay, a small lens that holds the central lights upside down and steady until vibration persuades it to wander. At the outside corners, rivulets meet in polite intersections and separate without argument. We pass out of the pier's lee, and the harbor remembers it has a pulse. The hull meets a low rib from some earlier wake. The cabin lifts a finger's width and sets it back, the way someone in a quiet room adjusts a book to be square on a table. Out on the deck, water breaks in pale, regular lines along the bow, each line unrolling like ribbon and softening under rain. The wake rights behind us as a combed garden, and the rain combs it again into finer pattern. Look left, and the island's edge is a lit margin. IFC soften, bank towers reading like ideas rather than instructions, the wheel a pale geometry and mist. Look right and Kowloon arrives in layers. The cultural center's slope darkened to velvet, the clock tower standing with rain-polished brick, hotel windows breathing a domestic amber. Above and behind, neon is quieter tonight, still present. Magentas turn wine dark, greens turn sea glass. All of it copies itself into the channel until the channel edits it into a single convincing sentence. In the open aisle, a stroller wheel ticks once at a seam, then learns the ferry's grammar. A phone screen lights a small blue square that the rain promptly rounds down in the glass. A man in a damp jacket takes off his hat, rests it crowned down on the bench. Beads line the brim, hesitate, and then step down to the wood one at a time with tiny, exact notes. The ferry hums beneath, the way a cat hums when it has found a lap and a rhythm worth keeping. If sleep is your aim, close the world to 3 elements: engine, low, window, soft, roof, bright. Let the engine own the inhale, let the roof own the exhale. Let the window be the space between. If focus is your aim, assign your next thought to the distance between 2 cross members on the ceiling start at the first. Finish by the second, rest your eyes on the wake, repeat. Mid-channel, a bell from another boat reaches through rain more color than note. Our ferry answers not with sound, but with motion. A small course correction that you feel as a gentle sideways breath. The bow points a degree toward the clock tower's silhouette. On the water, lamp stems from both shores meet and braid. Rungs tilt right themselves and are forgotten as new ones form. We pass an open doorway and borrow a second of outer air salt lifted by drizzle, diesel given manners by weather, something herbal from someone's thermos briefly outranking both. At the threshold, a bead swells on the lower lip of the frame until it is convinced and drops. It lands on the painted deck with a round syllable and is gone. The deck keeps its gloss. The cabin keeps its temperature cool enough to notice, warm enough to agree with. A row of orange life belts hangs from the ceiling like punctuation, their surfaces darkened to sincerity by damp. A tiny official sign near the bulkhead reads clearer under water's edit. Each letter wears a shadow that improves its mood. Near the bow, the ferry's name is repeated on a brass plate. The plate is a small sky crowded with beads. One after another, they let go and fall like measured stars. Kowloon grows larger by degrees, made gentle by rain. The cultural center's slope gathers a richer black. The clock tower's lamps grow a halo you can feel on your skin. The avenue of stars keeps a pale line along the water. We angle toward the Tsim Sha Tsui pier, and the engines change their adjective from go to arrive. Same voice, different intention. The hull makes a soft, agreeable conversation with the pontoon. Fenders kiss and release. A rope draws a straight line between vessel and shore. The bell speaks once more, not to hurry, only to mark. People rise with the ferry's rhythm rather than against it. Windows shed the last of their drops to the sills. The cabin allows the harbor back out. If you're ready for sleep, let this be your chapter break, eyes shut on the bell, breath out on the rope. If you're focused, plant your next sentence in the space between bell and latch and write it as the door slides. When the door opens, the pier's sound replaces the cabin's. A slightly wetter tick, a different shade of hush, the harbor still beneath both. We step into Kowloon's light with the island behind us written in water. The rain keeps the paragraph together. The ferry has said exactly enough. The gangway settles and the Kowloon side takes over the sound. A wetter tick from the roof edge, a lower hush from the promenade, the harbor's long vowel underneath. We step into a calmer geometry, broad paving, a rail with a precise chill, the clock tower keeping patient amber in the rain. Brick darkens to velvet. Mortar lines read like careful handwriting. At each cornice, water chooses edges, gathers into clear almonds, and lets go in slow, rounded notes. The promenade opens its horizon. Island towers soften to ideas, their lights turn kinder by weather. In the harbor, Lamp stems run like long ladders, break into coins when a gust arrives, and repair themselves without hurry. The cultural center's pale slope drinks the rain until it looks like folded paper. Drops travel the seam lines like neat stitches. Umbrellas move past as small rooms, black navy. A lacquered red tilting and correcting in a choreography the city learned long ago. Under the clock tower, the paving holds clean ovals of light. A single bead at the rail swells, decides, and falls tick on metal, then into water. Close by, the Star Ferry terminal breathes out its domestic glow. Green paint turned richer, windows fogging and clearing in slow squares. A gull takes the lee of a pillar, shakes one silver halo from its feathers, and lifts toward the pier roof where the rain becomes wires for a heartbeat and then hides. If you're drifting towards sleep, borrow the clock tower's pace, one slow inhale per side of the square shaft, one slow exhale as the cornice lets go. Keep only 3 sounds: roof tick, rail tick, harbor hush, and let the skyline turn from buildings to light. If you're working, use the promenade's lamp pools as waypoints, 1 paragraph per pool. Look up at the tower face as your checkpoint. Continue. We take the inner line of the walkway, where roof lips assign steady curtains to the ground in front of shopfront glass. Inside, cafe lamps make coins on tables. Outside, those coins repeat in puddles and tremble when a drop lands near center. A poster breeze behind condensation. Someone's fingertip has drawn a clear path through the fog, and the path is already knitting itself shut. The smells sit lightly salt pushed inland by drizzle, sweet coffee turned softer by weather, a thread of sea-bound diesel rounded down to intention. The clock tower keeps its details through rain, clock numerals clearer for their shadows, narrow louvers under the belfry deeper than in dry light, lightning rod a single clean line into cloud. When the minute hand leans a degree, it feels like a room changing key rather than time being told. A bell doesn't speak here, but the memory of bells does painted on the air by the chime we carried from the island. Rails along the edge are stainless and exact, beaded in even ranks. Every third bead chooses to fall. Each fall makes a rounded note that your breath can copy without effort. Below, the edge stones keep a thin thread running toward a quietly hungry grate that swallows at measured intervals. Leaves travel that curb line like small boats. Catch for a second on the grate and slide through, writing a minor rhythm into the larger one. We pause at an overlook where the skyline is framed between palms. Fronds handle rain with professionalism, big, slow notes from broad leaves. Tight, dry whispers from the ribbed undersides. Drops collect at tips until they lengthen and let go in clear threads. Beyond them, Central's tallest becomes a lantern blurred to kindness, Mid-Levels as suggestion. The wheel is a pale outline drawn with a magnifying glass. The harbor practices calligraphy with every drop that falls. The lines widen, soften, and still carry meaning. A vendor wipes the acrylic of a small cart. The cloth writes one clear pane into the fog, then the pane agrees to cloud again. Umbrellas knock politely when their ribs meet. Fabric on fabric says hup, brief, and domestic. A child declares the rain heavy and is corrected by the weather itself, thick for a minute, thin for 2, then steady again. Shoes translate surface, rubber hush, leather tap, the brief scuff of a sole meeting a seam in the paving and choosing which side to belong to. If sleep is near, close the field to 2 colors honey from the tower, graphite from the harbor, and let all other hues become memory. Count the tower's 4 faces once and then forget the number. If focus is the job, take the rail's beadwork as your metronome 1 sentence per drop. Check the skyline on the fall, continue, and let the promenade carry the rest. At the tower's base, a metal plaque wears a small sky in droplets. Letters carry shadows that make them read newly cut. A single bead at the lower corner refuses to fall longer than the others, and finally yields with a note soft enough to be permission rather than sound. The rain approves the decision and resumes its even grammar. We drift along the waterfront toward the open bay, where reflections grow longer and steadier. Fairy wakes arrive as gentle ribs that stretch the island lamps into strings of pearls. The pearls lengthen back into single stems as the wake passes. Across the channel, a neon sign breathes wine dark through mist, paints its color onto the water, and lets rain edit the edge to something truer than the original. The promenade prefers truth to spectacle. Rain helps it choose. Ahead, the Avenue of Stars lifts a paler strip along the rail where palm trunks give way to open edge. Handprints under glass glow like coins. Names read calmer through the weather's veil. We'll follow that line next, letting the beads on the handrail keep time and the skyline keep intention. For now, one last look back at the clock tower brick sincere. Numerals clean, the tower doing nothing except standing well in rain. The harbor holds the reflection steady, accepts each ring that crosses it, and mends the image without complaint. Your breath can copy that, receive, ripple, return. The promenade thins to a paler strip, and the Avenue of Stars takes the edge handprints under glass. Low lights stitched along the rail, the harbor opening wider to receive its own reflection. Rain does the patient work it likes best. Stainless handrails wear neat ranks of droplets. Each bead considers, bows, then falls tick on metal, hush into water small decisions that keep perfect time. Beneath our palms still returns a clean chill. The rail is an honest instrument. Pairs of drops release in a soft syncopation where the curve tightens. Singles where the line runs straight. Breathing can borrow that rhythm without trying. If you're drifting toward sleep, keep only 3 sounds: rail tick, roof thread, harbor hush, and let the skyline reduce to light. If you're working, walk one idea from post to post, then look up once at the water's long stem of gold before you begin the next. Handprints glow like coins under the wet panes. Condensation feathers the edges, so each name reads a touch softer, more human. A fingertip has traced a window in the fog, and the window is already knitting shut. Drops gather on the upper frame in even files. One swells to a pearl and draws a lucid path downward, sharpening the letters for a breath before the pain mists over again. It's the avenue's gentle magic. Fame turned into touch, touch turned into water, water turned into calm. Statues along the way darken to sincerity under rain. They don't pose, they agree with weather. Water sits along shoulders and jaw lines, chooses an elbow to fall from, finds the plinth with a rounded note. At their feet, square tiles hold slick. Tidy petals, little theaters where neon becomes wine dark, a fairy light becomes cream, and palm fronds bright passing calligraphy in thin scripts of silver. Shoes cross the tiles and the puddles correct themselves immediately, as if the floor had practiced for this. Harbor air is cleaner here by a finger's width. Salt leans close, diesel is given manners, and the smell of wet timber drifts up from a pier edge you can't quite see. The rain's texture changes with the wind, fine threads inside lamp halos, thicker beads when a gust shepherds drops off the canopy lip in a clear, brief curtain. When that curtain falls, it writes rings through a long reflection of the island lamps. The rings travel outward, touch the border stones, and disappear, leaving the stems truer than before. We pass a run of glazed display panels where film stills and portraits breathe behind glass. These panes have their own weather. Beads travel diagonally as the breeze insists. 2 rivulets meet, part, and meet again at a logo serif. A smiling face clears itself for 1 second when a drop pulls a path exactly down the middle, then blurs back to suggestion. If you're reading or studying, you can take that 1 second clarity as your micro reset. Glance, inhale, continue. Umbrellas move like quiet constellations. Nylon gives bright, close taps. Canvas answers in rounder syllables. When ribs brush, fabric says polite domestic. At the rail, the hem gathers a fringe and releases together, a silver comb that vanishes before you decide to count. The avenue keeps everyone walking at the city's favorite speed, deliberate, unhurried, exact. Across the water, the island becomes a gentle theory of towers. Vertical lights fall down the glass as rain persuades them, then stand up again inside the harbor as soft columns. A low ferry hums by and lays a fan of pale ribs on the surface. The ribs lift the reflections into strings of coins and then smooth them back into single threads. You can align your focus with that. Thread, right, coins, breathe, thread, continue. A palm leans into the edge of the frame, fronds doing their textbook work, heavy drops in slow bass from the broad blades, light, dry whisper from the ribbed undersides. At each tip, an almond of water lengthens and falls in a straight, clear line that you can follow with your eyes until it joins the larger grammar at ankle height. Curb thread, great swallow, harbor sigh. The walkway lights are kind low, steady, never arguing with the sky. Their ovals overlap into a soft runway that makes easy promises. One pull to start the thought, one pull to finish it. Along the curb, a thin river gathers from 100 minor decisions roof lips. Rail undersides, the small brave drops that leave an umbrella's hem, and chooses a grate with a quiet, satisfied gulp. 2 leaves reach the bars, hesitate, and slide through together. The grate remembers neither leaf 5 seconds later. The avenue shows how to let things pass. If you're falling asleep, reduce to 2 colors and 1 shape, honey on stone, graphite on water, and the circle the rain draws in every puddle. Count 2 circles and then forget counting. If you're working, keep the rails beadwork and the long lamp stems. They'll mark progress for you while your hands do the rest. A child presses a palm to a plexi pane, compares it to the handprint below, laughs once in a round vowel that the rain softens into texture and folds into the harbor hush. A photographer wipes a lens. The cloth writes a clear crescent on the glass, then the crescent yields to fog. A vendor at a cart taps a plastic lid to shake water into a bucket toke. Token, the bucket answers with its one note. These tiny instruments tune the avenue without needing to be heard. We pause at a rail break where a lower section lets the harbor lean closer. Here the beads gather faster, choose sooner, fall with brighter ticks. Between uprights, the water shows a tighter stipple. Farther out, it relaxes into wider rings. The skyline drifts a degree when a wind shift persuades the rain to draw diagonal lines for a moment. Then the air calms and the lines return to vertical. The city never argues with the river about what the correct angle is. Both are right in turn. Ahead, the walkway bends toward open view, the long sweep of bay where reflections run farther and steadier, the handprints thin. The rail becomes the main sentence. We'll follow it until the ladder of lights across the water becomes a single, unbroken thought, then turn inland toward umbrella rivers and taxi ribbons. For now, linger in this simple proof. Touch preserved under glass, light preserved in water, time preserved by rain. Take one more breath with the rail's small decision form. Fall and let the harbor rewrite the skyline into something kind enough to keep. The harbor falls behind by a few ovals of light, and the city gathers itself into streets. A crosswalk waits at Salisbury Road, signal breathing amber into rain. Weight glows behind damp glass. A thin halo of moisture makes each letter kind. The beeper speaks in polite dots, rounded by weather. When the green figure appears, umbrellas lean forward together, and the road becomes a satin ribbon white bars, slick and true. Red tail lights laying long threads that beat over seams and straighten. Air changes here, less salt, more shopfront warmth. MTR stairwells exhale a soft fog of people and conditioned air. The fog meets rain and turns to friendly cloud at street level. Under the canopy edge, drops gather to a silver comb and release in one soft curtain. Shoes translate surfaces, rubber hush on paint, fine grit on stone, a single bright tap where a heel finds a metal stud and moves on. Umbrellas arrange into rivers along the walk. Black and navy make the main current. A sudden yellow, a lacquered red, a see-through dome become bright eddies that pass and rejoin. Nylon talks in crisp consonants. Canvas answers with rounder notes. When ribs brush, fabric says hup and is forgiven. At each awning seam, water chooses to fall from exactly the same point as yesterday and tomorrow, a bead practiced at becoming a drop. Nathan Road announces itself without raising its voice. Signs breathe magenta and jade through the weather, colors soften to wine and sea glass by the rain. Light learns manners on wet tile and glass. Reflections organize into clean rectangles and parallel lines. A double-decker arrives with steady certainty. Upper windows show small. Domestic plays a reader, a phone glow. Someone watching rain do what it does best. Wheels turn the street to lace. Lace settles, road resumes its gloss. The bus's wake is a low applause that the city approves and forgets. If you're drifting toward sleep, borrow the crossing's cadence. Wait, walk, breathe, red. Amber, green, breathe, and let numbers dissolve into the sound of rain on fabric and road. If you're working, set yourself one small thought per shop front. Begin at the neon, finish at the door frame, look up once to the taxi ribbons, continue. A taxi slows at the curb, roof wearing a shallow film that releases at the boot in ordered beads. The beads drum a precise line along granite before they become part of the larger hush. Indicator lights blink like patient stars behind rain. A hand reaches from inside, pays, and vanishes. The door closes with a polite seal. Tail lights pull 2 rubies across wet asphalt until a ripple turns them to coins, and the street obliges by straightening them again. We pass an island of shelter where a bus stop panel collects marching drops. Route numbers sharpen as a bead pulls a clear stroke through condensation, then soften back to suggestion. The metal bench wears a tidy crown along its edge. Every third bead chooses to fall tick, rest, tick. If you're counting for calm, you can keep that. Beat, beat, fall, beat, beat, fall. If you're marking progress, use it as a metronome, 1 sentence per fall. A side lane breathes sesame and ginger from a half-open kitchen door. Steam draws a rectangle into rain, curls once under a sign, and hands itself back to weather. Inside, porcelain meets wood in soft syllables. Outside, umbrellas reform their rivers and go around. A plastic strip curtain melts hello with a damp whisper each time someone moves through. The street absorbs the detail and resumes its even paragraph. Neon here is not a shout, but a weathered kindness. A green cross turns sea glass and paints a pale ladder on the road. A magenta character becomes wine dark and writes itself into a puddle that edits the stroke into a perfect loop before handing it back. Above, LED panels lower their brightness without complaining, as if the rain had reminded them of their audience. Colors go from announcement to permission. Crosswalk beeps begin a new cycle, and the umbrella rivers reform with a choreography that looks practiced because it is. The signal's tempo is a good breath. Dot, dot, dot. Prepare. Dot, dash, dot, dodge, dot. Go. Hush. Arrive. On the island, a pair of planters spill palm fronds into the frame. The big leaves give slow, bass notes when they shed. The ribbed undersides write a dry whisper under the rain. 2 instruments, 1 weather. The curb carries a narrow river of decisions, roof drip, awning fringe, umbrella hem, sign edge, all choosing downhill. At the grate, the river takes a polite gulp at steady intervals. A leaf travels, stalls, slides through. The grate remembers nothing and is better for it. Reflections in the curb channel are their own city. A cream rectangle becomes a small lantern. A jade bar becomes a ribbon. Both move down canal and dissolve. Shop fronts keep domestic ovals inside the night. A tailor's form turns satin underwater. A phone shop's blues are measured to kindness. A bakery's glass fogs and clears and bands where warm bread and rain exchange terms. Fingers draw half moons in the mist. Within the curve, the street exists indoors for a second and returns outside when fog knits the mark shut. Buses inhale and exhale in the outer lane with practiced care. A minibus rides a softer rhythm at lower height, almost a whispered version of the double-decker's sentence. Wipers across all windscreens agree on a shared vocabulary: huff, clear, huff, clear. Between wafts, the city holds its breath in order, then continues. If sleep is near, let the wipers be your only instrument. If focus is near, let them be your reset button every 30 seconds. At a junction, signals paint the street in pages: jade, tea, wine. Taxis gather in twos, then ones, then none. A cyclist goes through with one polite bell and two narrow crescents that vanish in a heartbeat. A pedestrian moves their umbrella 1 degree to share space. The degree is understood without words. Rain edits everyone into the same chorus. Nathan's long perspective pulls us north. The umbrella river thickens near Jordan. Side lanes split and rejoin. Signs add depth like dim lanterns in a tunnel. We stay at walking speed, keeping the rail of shop fronts as our guide and the beads on any handy edge as our metronome form, fall, form, fall. The road's ribbons continue their arithmetic. Straight, bead, straight. Underfoot, paint is satin. Stone is honest, water is grammar. If you're drifting, reduce the palette to 3. Jade, honey, graphite. Keep only one sound, the curb's gulp, or only one shape, the round ring a drop makes and immediately forgets. If you're working, take the next block to set a small goal, 1 paragraph per corner, then let the rain do the pacing. Ahead, the glow lowers and narrows, awnings multiply. Tarps begin to speak a brighter drum. The umbrella river relaxes into smaller streams that choose alleys and markets. Taxi ribbons turn to occasional commas, then ellipses. The city is changing register again, from avenue to lanes, from glass to canvas, from signage to voices. We'll follow it there. The avenue relaxes into alleys. Neon turns from pronouncement to glow. Rain lowers its voice and learns new instruments: canvas, plastic, corrugate, string. Awnings overlap like scales, each seam assigning a steady drip. Where 2 canopies meet, a silver bead gathers, hesitates, and falls with a brighter note. Where 3 meet, a brief fringe releases together like a polite curtain. Boxes stack under plastic skirts. Cardboard darkens to honest browns that hold their shape. A hand rolls a zipper, shutter up a meter, and the teeth answer with a soft, wet rattle zip, rest, zip before the canopy lip scribbles a fresh line of drops across the threshold. Light inside is tea-colored and careful. A small radio keeps an older song wrapped in rain until it's texture rather than melody. Temple Street announces itself not with volume, but with fabric. Tarps stretch overhead in patient geometry, blue, green, striped, each hosting its own percussion. Flat stretches take a quiet patter, tight spans drum brighter. Low sax gather an almond until it lets go in one rounded thup. The market breathes in lanes, goods heaped low, signs hung high, people moving in a shared, rain-taught choreography. Umbrellas become negotiators. Rivers of black and navy slow to streams, then to eddies that stall at a stall and turn again. When 2 ribs meet, fabric says hup, a shoulder tilts, clearance is achieved. The stream resumes, nylon speaks in quick taps. Canvas answers in round syllables. A clear dome makes visible the beads running their slow races down the ribs before releasing at the hem as a silver fringe that vanishes before you decide to count. On tables, plastic sleeves protect prints and trinkets. Beads march over them in even files, turning images into tiny aquariums for a heartbeat. A tray of watches becomes a field of small moons. A sheet of postcards becomes a shifting skylight. The vendor's hand lifts a corner, sheds a comb of water, replaces the weight, and the aquariums are reset to rain. Down at shoe level, the market is another city. Cables trail water to the curb. A narrow river carries decisions, awning drip, tarp seam, umbrella hem to a grate that swallows with low, unhurried gulps. A dropped receipt flattens and darkens, its letters read clearer for being wet, then cloud as the paper agrees to become weather. You can walk half a block reading the world only in reflections. Jade characters turn to ribbons, warm rectangles of interior light stretched into coins, taxi ribbons passing like red meteor trails along the curb channel and dissolving. If you're drifting towards sleep, reduce this lane to 4 instruments: tarp drum, high, canopy patter, mid, gutter hush, low, zipper rattle, brief. Breathe with the low and let the others decorate your attention until it sets itself down. If you're working, take the crossbars that tie tarps to poles as your outline 1 idea per bar. Glance at the drip line, continue. A stall keeper shakes a cover and the lane brightens 1 soft wave of drops, then order again. Clips hold plastic banners at the corners. Each clip wears a bead that refuses to fall until a gust leans the banner and persuades it to let go. The bead hits the table with a precise wooden tick and becomes market. Nearby, a string of tiny LEDs under the tarp stitches a steady pale line across the fabric. Raindrops crossing the strip appear as brief comets, then return to being water. From the next block, a mouth of steam drifts over to visit ginger and garlic wrapped in warm air. It noses through tarps, curls once around a pole, and decides to be rain before arriving. Porcelain clicks somewhere inside the weather, oil murmurs. A ladle taps a pot twice, courteous, domestic, satisfied. We'll keep most of the street food music for later. Here it's the passing perfume of heat in a cool place, a footnote that makes the sentence friendlier. Stalls specialize in their own weather. A stand of phone cases wears rain like armor beads running off in straight, glossy lines. A table of fabrics drinks it, colors going 1 shade deeper and more sincere. A case of lenses shows the market upside down in circles. Drops hop between the domes like thoughtful punctuation. A vendor's chalk sign reads truer for being damp. Every curve holds a dark edge that sharpens the letter. Temple Street's long perspective narrows and widens as tarps sag and lift. Between bays, the sky is a smeared slate. Inside bays, a private ceiling keeps the world at a human height. Where tarps are patched, the line of falling water staggers. Left, right, pause, left again. Where a string has been retied, the beat path changes a degree, and you can hear it in the timing tick, tick, tick. Rest. It's a metronome you can copy without thinking. Ride on tick, breathe on rest. A man cycles slowly through with a bag-laden rear rack. Tires cutting 2 pale crescents in the sheen that close behind him in seconds. A child counts lanterns, loses the number, laughs, returns to counting drops on the edge of an umbrella instead. A tourist tests a zipper and the stall holder nods once. The teeth agree to run true. The sound is a zipper in a library pleasant, small, tidy. We step aside for a passing dolly. Its wheels splash a polite grammar across the paving hush-hush over flat stone, higher hush over patched concrete, small applause where it meets a shallow puddle, and writes rings through a lamp coin. The rings travel until they meet a curb and go to ground. Under the table edge, a cat blinks at the weather, tail a slow metronome. Beats form along the awning seam above its kingdom and choose their moment with aristocratic care. Neon here is a benevolent ghost. Magenta softens to claret, greens to sea glass, strokes of character rounded by rain until the sign looks more like meaning than marketing. Each color copies itself into the tarp sheen, then into the puddle, then into your eyes as calm. The market prefers this translation. Nothing needs to be sharp to be understood. If you're nearing sleep, have the detail. Keep only the tarp drum and the gutter hush. Count 1 seam where 3 tarps meet and let it be the whole sky. If you're still with a task, use the rhythm of the zipper you just heard zip start. Pause, consider, zip, commit, and finish the small thing in front of you. Beyond the next cross lane, The market breathes deeper, more tarps, closer stalls, brighter percussion. Temple Street's spine continues, but we turn a gentle corner toward Yau Ma Tei, where fruit crates shine like lacquer and signage hums at a different pitch. The rain agrees to change instruments with us, less drum, more bell, fewer LEDs, more glass. The same patient tempo. For now, one last look back at the canopy geometry lines, seams, fringes, clips, the way weather turns retail into rhythm. A bead gathers at the tarp's lowest point, lengthens until it's surer, and falls. Tick hush. The lane resets, ready to be itself again. The lanes broaden into corners that feel like small stages. Yau Ma Tei greets rain with crates and lamps and a humming alphabet of signs. Plastic awnings reach from stall to stall, color-washed jade, milk, a faint tea red from heat bulbs, each seam assigning a steady drip. Boxes stack in tidy towers, foam white, wax cardboard, old wood gone the color of wet toast. Water travels their edges like quick handwriting and drops neatly to the curb. Fruit stalls glow warm against the gray. Persimmons sit like lacquered suns. Dragon fruit breathe a gentler magenta under rain. Greens turn deeper and surer choice some, guylian, long stalks shining as if polished. Plastic curtains hang in strips and mouth hello with a soft, damp whisper whenever someone passes. Inside the strips, the air has its own weather, warmer by a degree, fuller with the clean smell of leaf and the faint sugar of cut citrus. Red heat lamps make small planets above the fruit. Rain beads on the wire guards and releases in patient singles tick on the wooden counter. Tick in the shallow tray where stems and rubber bands collect. A scale pan receives a handful of limes, metal speaking a bright syllable soft at once by water. The vendor's hand returns change. Coins clink, then sound like leather when they meet a damp palm. Numbers here are quick and kind. Corners turn into conversations. A man in a nylon jacket taps a price on a waterproof calculator. The beep is brief and modest. A customer tries a cherry tomato. The bite is small, exact. The nod is approval. A raincoat sleeve brushes a plastic tarp up. Then rain edits the sound back into general hush. Umbrellas tip and correct in choreography learned at birth. 1 degree left to share space, another back to reclaim it. The signage hum is a choir in this weather. Old neon breathes a low, even note. Fluorescent ballasts make a smaller, higher one. LEDs keep quiet but glow with steady intention. The tones layer below and then above until the rain rounds both into fabric. Where neon still lives, strokes of character become wine-dark ribbons, their reflections turning to coins in every puddle and back to lines on the next gust. Underfoot, the curb carries a disciplined stream, awning drip, tarp fringe, umbrella hem, everything choosing the same downhill. Grates take polite gulps at measured intervals. Leaves become small boats, stall for a second at the bars, slide through, and write brief rings that touch the stone and vanish. If you're drifting toward sleep, you can keep only that. Gulp, rings, hush. If you're working, use the gulps as checkpoints, 1 sentence per swallow. Eyes up to the signs, continue. At one corner, a bamboo pole lifts the tarp crest, giving rain a choice. It chooses to travel the pole in clear, separate drops, landing in a bucket with a wooden tone that repeats just slowly enough to be a metronome. Nearby, a vendor wipes a plexi price board. The cloth draws a crisp rectangle through condensation, numbers sharpen, then the pane agrees to cloud again. The rhythm is friendly, clear cell, fog, clear cell, fog. Yau Ma Tei's palette holds well in rain. Jade vegetables, red lamps, cream tiles, graphite road. Faces and hands carry the same color story warm, specific, under the weather's soft equalizer. A bus sighs at the far lane. Its windows are small living rooms for 2 seconds, someone counting notes, someone texting, someone water behave itself. Then the bus moves and the lane goes back to fruit and gloss. If sleep is near, reduce the scene to 3 elements: lamp, leaf, drip, and let them repeat until they become one. Inhale on the red lamp's glow. Exhale on the green shine of the leaves. Rest on the drip. If focus is the aim, assign a corner to each step of your task. List up the heat lamp, decide at the scale, commit at the bucket's wooden note. Rain will keep time. Signage will keep a steady key. We trade one stall's weather for the next. Mangoes breathe sugar against the cool air. Lychees hold tiny beads along their skins like ready-made rain. Bananas wear a calm satin under the lamps. A small knife kisses a cutting board toque, and a wedge of pomelo opens like a yellow flower. Steam from a nearby clay pot rice shop drifts over, curls around a pole, and decides to become drizzle before it touches anything. Everything participates. Nothing insists. At the crosswalk, weight glows behind damp glass. The beeper's dots are rounded by rain and politely ignore the market's tempo. When green arrives, umbrellas become a quiet river for 8 heartbeats, and then slow back into eddies at the next corner. Taxi ribbons lay rubies along the sheen, beat at a seam, and extend. The red reflects into a puddle where the lamp coin waits. A drop lands dead center and draws rings through both colors until they agree again. Look close to the edge of any awning, and you'll find the city's patience. Beads form in even files, 1 per rib, and then, unpredictably, 2 release together tick. Rest like a quiet joke between tarps. A clear dome umbrella turns its beads into little comets sliding down the ribs. At the hem they cue, then throw a silver fringe that vanishes before you count to 3. A plastic bag catches 1 stray drop and makes a bright, dignified drum all by itself. The older buildings keep a gentler echo. Tile facades deepen to honesty. Window grills collect neat necklaces that choose their moment. A fan under a canopy hums at the edge of hearing, pushing warm air out to meet the rain. A small shrine shelf glows under a roof, lip incense smoke fiddling its way into drizzle. A brass bowl wearing perfect beads like a crown that never spills. The rain finds the bell's rim, travels, and lets go in a note so soft you register it as permission rather than sound. If you're counting to sleep, count crates, 3 high, 4 across, and then forget the number when a drop lands in the bucket. If you're counting for progress, track only the red lamps, start at 1, finish the paragraph of the next, take the beads fall as your reset. This neighborhood likes small promises kept well. The market yields to a wider mouth of street. Signs step back, awnings thin, and the hum relaxes into a steadier road tone. Ahead, the river of umbrellas splits toward Mong Kok. Tarps appear again, closer and louder. Zipper shutters rattle like polite rainstorms in miniature. The color shifts from fruit and tile to sneaker leather and LEDs. Our pace stays what the night has taught, deliberate, unhurried, exact. One last corner, a vendor shakes a tarp and writes a temporary waterfall in a lean silver for a second, gone the next. The crates shine, the leaves shine, the road shines. The bucket says toke. The signage hum keeps its long, even vowel. We turn toward the denser percussion of Ladies' Market and the zipper teeth music that waits there. Streets tighten, light gathers closer. Mong Kok meets the rain with fabric and rhythm tarps in long lanes, cords drawn like staff lines, zipper shutters speaking their small, precise language. The first row of canopies comes as a gentle ceiling, blue and green stripes, plain beige, clear plastic patched with tape. Each span assigns its own percussion. Flat tarps take a soft patter. Top ones drum bright. Low sags nurse an almond of water until it lets go in a rounded thump that the lane's gloss immediately absorbs. A shutter rises a careful meter zip. Rest, zip in the sound lands like punctuation rather than noise. Another stall rolls halfway down. The teeth travel clean. The slider clicks once at a loop of cord and stops. Rain draws diagonal lines along the metal and turns them to silver threads. Inside the seam, a tiny rivulet finds the path it prefers and writes it again and again until it is muscle memory in water. The walkway is 2 umbrellas wide until it isn't. People learn the choreography at the first tarp: lift, tilt, fold. Umbrellas become walking sticks, then bouquets, then quiet fringes that drip in pairs from the hem. Nylon taps bright. Canvas answers round. When 2 ribs touch, fabric says hup, and the stream reforms. A clear dome makes visible races along its ribs bead sliding, merging, letting go at the edge as a silver comb that vanishes before you can count to 3. Tables keep a calm shine under the lamps. Scarves drink a shade deeper of their own color. Little jade charms become sea glass coins. Lacquer boxes read newly cut where water collects on edges and falls in tidy singles to the cloth below. Ziploc sleeves over postcards turn each image into a tiny aquarium. Drops swim, settle, and the city behind the plastic changes expression with every bead. A vendor lifts one corner, sheds a brief curtain into a bucket with a wooden toque, and replaces the weight. The aquariums reset to rain. Look down, and the market writes a second narrative at boot height. A thin canal runs along the curb-carrying tarp fringe, awning drip, umbrella hem all choosing downhill. Grates take courteous gulps at intervals that could be a metronome if you need one. Rings travel out from each gulp and vanish under solace that pass with deliberate care. A receipt flattens, letters darken, then blur into weather. A red reflection runs the channel, turns to coins at a seam, and becomes a ribbon again. Above, signs soften to permission. Neon characters breathe claret and jade through water. Glad to stem themselves to kindness. Their colors copy onto the tarps, then into the puddles, where a gust stitches everything into thin. Diagonal scripts for 10 seconds before the air relaxes and the lines return to vertical. The street never argues with the rain about angle. Both are right in turn. Some stalls have their own weather. A rack of t-shirts holds beads along every hanger hook. When wind remembers itself, 3 fall together, tick dash, then silence. A tray of metal keychains collects a bright constellation. One star drops, another appears, the sky unchanged. A string of fairy lights under a clear plastic lip stitches unwavering points of cream. Each drop that crosses the wire becomes a brief comment, and then forgets to be anything but water. If you're drifting toward sleep, reduce the lane to 4 instruments: tarp drum, high; zipper shutter, bright; bucket note, wood; gutter hush, low. Breathe on the hush, let the others decorate the rhythm, and let the corners soften. If you're working, take the crossropes overhead as your outline one small task per knot. At each knot, a glance to the curb channel, continue. We pass a stretch where tarps have been patched, squares and rectangles in a quilt of practical decisions. At every patch edge, the drop pattern staggers left, right, pause. Left again, and the ear learns a syncopation without effort. The lane narrows and the city speaks closer. Soft negotiations at a price board, the beep of a waterproof calculator. A zipper tested and approved. Words dissolve into texture at this speed. Only the timing remains. A gust leans into the market. Tarps bow and release together, 100 bright almonds falling in chorus. The lane's surface blooms with rings. Sneaker treads sketch crescents that close in seconds. A plastic banner flares, and the clips along its edge each release one bead with a precise metallic tick, unison for a moment, then staggered again. The gust moves on. Order returns as if it had never been persuaded to leave. We step aside as a dolly whispers through, hush hush over flat tile, a higher hush over plywood patches, a round applause through a shallow puddle that turns a lamp coin to a perfect target. On a low crate, a cat edits the night with the slow metronome of its tail. The canopy seam above its place produces drops at aristocratic intervals, and the animal does not find this remarkable. At a cross lane, rain reveals its arithmetic. 3 canopy lips terminate above a single table edge. Beads form in even ranks. One refuses to fall for longer than the others and finally yields with a note soft enough to register as permission rather than sound. A hand adjusts a clamp. The rivulet changes course by 1 degree. The market's music accepts the revision and keeps time. If sleep is near, keep only 2 colors in a shape: jade, honey, and the circle that rain writes in every puddle. Count 2 circles, forget the number. If focus is your aim, match your paragraph to the shutter's pace. Zip, start, pause, consider, zip, commit, rest, breathe. Beyond the next block, the tarp's thin and the lane brightens by a shade. Ladies' Market will continue without us, lanes and measures repeating like a friendly refrain. We turn toward Yuen Street, where sneaker rows and Mirror Street's weight leather turn satin by weather, laces like neat white lines, and rain polishing every color to its truest self. For now, one last look at the geometry above: ropes, seams, clips, patches. At the grammar below: gutter, grate, ring. A bead gathers at the tarp's lowest point, lengthens until it's sure, and false tick, hush. The lane resets, ready again to be exactly what it is. Yuen Street lines up its trophies under rain. Sneakers sit in confident ranks. White, ash, ink, citrus, and water turns every material honest. Leather becomes satin. Mesh drinks to a darker weave. Suede deepens to velvet. LED strips set in shelf lips soften themselves in weather, so each pair glows like a small lighthouse under its own overhang. The aisle is 2 umbrellas wide, sometimes 1, and the city's choreography adjusts without debate. Awnings here are practical, trimmed closer to the stalls. Their seams assign steady singles. Where the gutter is tight, drops arrive brighter. Where canvas relaxes, the patter is lower, softer. A vendor brushes a toe cap with a square of microfiber 1 clean arc that leaves a small comet of water sliding to the tread. The comet reaches the edge, falls with a clear note into a tray, and is forgotten. A shoehorn clinks once on a metal shelf and becomes part of the lane's patient grammar. Down at ankle height, the road is a mirror. Paint lays satin, manhole lids polished to graphite. Curb channels carry thin rivers that braid and rebraid around the square legs of display tables. A line of red from a taxi smears to a ruby seam, beads over a crown in the asphalt, becomes coins at a shallow ripple, then lengthens back into a disciple ribbon. The sneakers reflect a long, delicious distortion solace stretched to boats. Laces to white tracks, logos to bright hieroglyphs that make more sense in water than in air. If you're drifting toward sleep, reduce the scene to 3 elements: patter on canvas, mid, shallow gulps at the grate, low, soft LED hum, barely there. Breathe with the low and let the other 2 draw the edges around your attention until it sets itself down. If you're working, take the racks as milestones, 1 paragraph per shelf. Pause on the drip, glance into the Mirror Street, continue. Try a micro world, a single white pair, raindrops standing in a neat constellation across the toe box. Each bead holds an upside-down stall in its curved glow, shadow, a slice of passing umbrella, then leans and goes, leaving the leather cleaner than before. Next to it, black knit patterns itself with rain-tiny beads nested in the weave like patient stars. A hand tests the bounce of a midsole. Thumb presses, foam sighs. The shoe returns to form and accepts a thin crown of new droplets as if to say yes. Zipper shutters speak the market's bright language in short phrases: zip, rest, zip whenever a stall opens a little more to the weather. Plastic covers over boxes show the city upside down in rows. Drops march across them, turning logos to small rivers, then to clear panes, then to soft fog as the next film of water settles. A vendor shakes a tarpaulin. A silver curtain falls. Rings walk the lane. Sneakers above stay dry under the narrow awning lip engineering executed by habit. A customer tests a pair on the mat. Laces cross clean. A knot tightens with that small fabric squeak that makes sense in rain. The first step prints a darker ellipse that lightens at the edges first, then from the center, then becomes pavement again. The vendor's nod is a quiet punctuation. The bag is handed over. A tiny toke from the receipt tray closes the sentence. Money sounds different in wet weather, less clang, more cloth, which suits this street's patience. Above, signs soften to guidance rather than insistence. A vertical jade panel paints a ladder along the mirror street. A magenta halo lays wine-dark coins under the awnings. A green cross decides to be sea glass and copies itself into the curb channel. Wipers on a passing minibus sweep a small, exact huff and leave a clear letterbox that fog begins to reclaim at once. Inside, one face glows in foam light, another in LED. A third simply looks at rain doing what it's good at. The audio is polite. Tarp singles, gutter hush, zipper phrases, soul squeaks that decide quickly not to echo. Somewhere behind a stall, a small fan turns. Its home is a friendly thread that warns the air by a degree under the canopy. Now and then a kettle clicks and gives a soft, hooray sigh. Steam noses the drip line and agrees to become drizzle before touching anything. You can keep that kettle as your reset. Click, begin, sigh, carry, drip, release. Look into the mirror street and a choreography appears. Umbrellas translate into moving planets. An arm becomes a comet. The line of shoes reads as a procession of small stages. The puddle pushes into an abstract painting and then returns to representation. When a bus crosses at the far end, its upper windows become a row of warm squares sliding through the water, each square trailing a short tail that breaks into dots over a ripple and stitches itself back to a straight seam. The rain edits without scolding, improves without boasting. If sleep is near, have the palette. Keep only white sneakers, graphite road, and one ribbon of red. Let all other color become kindness. Count 2 gulps at the grate and forget counting. If focus is the job, take the drip rate at the awning seam as your meter 1 sentence per fall, and let the LED shelf edge be your checkpoint at the end of each line. A moment of gust. Tarps bow. 100 bright almonds fall together. Laughter rises and is rounded into texture. Umbrellas tilt 1 degree in return. The lane surface blossoms rings. Sneaker treads lace through them. Rings find the curb and disappear. A plastic tag on a lace flicks a single note against a box teak, so exact it feels like permission to move. At the cross street, Yuen steps out of its self-portrait for a breath. Thorax thin. The sky lowers by a shade. Bus roofs appear beyond a railing slick and reflective, carrying small pools that let go as the road shakes them free-ordered beads, hitting granite with a brief run and joining the larger hush. That elevation is where we're headed. Prince Edward footbridges, the view of buses like slow rivers beneath, and a handrail that keeps perfect time. Take one last look back down the mirror row on row of color made calm by water, each shoe a lighthouse, each puddle a page. A bead at the awning's lowest point lengthens until it knows itself and falls. The street resets. We turn toward the stairs. Stairs lift us out of mirror streets into a lane of air. The Prince Edward footbridges cross above traffic like measured sentences rail. Pane, beam, each part learning rain in its own accent. The first step changes the sound. From tarp drum to glass powder, from curb gulp to a higher, open hush that folds the city into a softer key. Our hand finds the rail. Steel returns a precise chill, beaded in even ranks that decide their futures with quiet certainty. Below, bus roofs are slow rivers. Thin films of water ride the crowns until the road persuades them to choose an edge. At each stop, the film gathers, hesitates, and releases as ordered fringes that drum a brief tambourine along the curbstones pat, 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 before joining the larger hush. Double-deckers breathe in place. A modest plume of warmth rises from rooftop grills, catches fine rain, and writes it into faint silver threads that vanish a meter up. Wipers wipe and the letterbox clears. Fog begins the reclamation immediately, polite and persistent. The bridge's glass panels wear sheet music. Drops start as single notes, meet, become thin rivulets, split into parts, and never argue about harmony. Where the gasket meets frame, beads line up like disciplined punctuation. Every third one chooses the fall tick exact enough to copy with breath. If you're drifting towards sleep, keep only 3 sounds from up here. Glass patter, high. Roof fringe, mid. Road hush, low. Breathe with the low. Let the mid count without you. Let the high draw the edges of your attention and set it down gently. We pause midway where the view widens. Nathan Road flows beneath ribbons of taxi red, jade signals soften to sea glass, shop fronts delivering warm rectangles that rain edits into kindness. The crosswalk's white glow reads calmer from above. The beeper's dots arrive as rounded thread. Umbrellas below negotiate geometry like a silent ballet. 1 degree left, 2 degrees right, hop when ribs meet and the river reforms. From this height, you can see the choreography write itself into reflection and then erase itself at the curb. The bridge itself keeps trustworthy time. Handrail beads form in tidy files. Singles along straight runs, pairs at each gentle bend, tick-tick. Rest, that small syncopation you can borrow for working. Sentence, sentence, breath. Along the underside of the top rail, larger drops nurse their weight and release with discrete wooden notes on the support plates, an exact syllable that lives half in sound and half in intention. A bus eases under us and announces its slow punctuation. Stop doors breathe, roof fringe drums. Go fringe stops, ribbons of taillights lengthen. The roof carries shallow pools between ribs. When the driver pulls away, the pools tilt to a corner and spill in clean sheets that break into beads midair, a brief glitter that the lane immediately returns to hush. In the wake, the road remembers the bus for 5 seconds in a darker gloss, then forgets rain's gift to everyone. The overhead glazing turns the skyline into a moving painting. A magenta sign breathes wine dark and stretches to a ribbon along the pane. A green cross becomes a pale ladder that raindrops climb down and dissolve. On the sill, a shallow tray drinks the patter in small bell notes, pitched by how much water is already waiting there. If you want a micro reset, count 3 soft pings and let go of numbers before the 4th arrives. Underfoot, the bridge is a low drum, not from weight, but from weather rain turning tread plate into muted rhythm. Footsteps translate to commas rather than exclamations. A cyclist leads a folded bike like a companion, tires drawing 2 faint commas on the wet metal that the air erases a meter later. A figure pauses by the glass to text. Their phone paints a small blue-white square onto the pane, rippling when a drop lands in the projection center. We shift to the next span where bus tops queue at a light. Each roof becomes an observatory. On one, beads arrange in constellations across the skylight. On another, rivulets braid from assay housings to gutters, then leap as brief waterfalls that split in air and arrive on the road as applause. A minibus, lower by a deck, writes smaller syllables, softer fringes. Lighter drums, its lightbox glow moving through rain like a portable moon. If you're here to sleep, reduce the world to 2 planes, the glass at your shoulder and the roofs below. Let the glass be your inhale patter, and the roof fringe your exhale drum, hush. If you're here to focus, take the bridge's posts as waypoints, 1 clear thought per post. Check the roof pattern once, continue. The city will keep breath for you. At the span's mid-bay, the escalator lifts rain and people together. Steps rise with a soft, regular teeth, hum. Drops land on the black comb at the foot and sound like a very small rain stick. A handrail ribbon black, polished, wears a moving constellation that travels with your palm. Beads gather, ride, and leap at the turn with a bright tick. The escalator's canopy lip gathers its own fringe and releases every 10 seconds in a thin, clean curtain, a metronome for anyone who needs one. A gust remembers itself. The bridge breeze, glass shows diagonal wires for 5-10 seconds. Umbrellas below tilt in unison. Bus roof pools slide 2 tiles to the left and choose a new corner for their spill. Our handrail beads respond in pairs tick-tick, then return to singles when the air calms. The city accepts the edit like a good sentence accepts a comma. Look farther along, and a tram line appears in perspective beyond the junction, bells reaching here as persuasion rather than command. The ding lives in rain for a beat and becomes another thread in the fabric. Headlights braid on the wet road. Each lane writes its own strand. All resolve at the intersection into clean, wide sheen. From above, the pattern looks inevitable, like water finding gravity's grammar. We lean close to watch micro-worlds. At the panel edge, 2 beads race, one fast along smooth glass, one slow along the rubber gasket. The fast one wins and breaks into a tiny comet tail. The slow one becomes a lens that holds a whole bus upside down, perfect until vibration persuades it to move. On a roof below, a thin steam ribbon escapes a vent, collects a constellation of drops, and turns itself back to clear air in 2 meters. Brief miracles, constant pace. If sleep is near, keep only tick, rail, patter, glass, hush road, and let the scene blur to a kind arrangement of lights. If focus is your aim, map your next paragraph to the light cycle below. Red, frame it. Amber, simplify, green, right, repeat. The footbridge will carry you. We take the final span and angle toward stairs. As we descend, the sound shifts back from glass register to canvas register. Bus roofs pass one last time under the lambing fringes in order, drums exact, ribbons reliable. The handrail returns a last precise bead, swells to its moment, and falls period. Street level brightens with tarps and LEDs again. Ahead waits Sham Shui Po and the bright tarp percussion of Apliu Street Electronics under awnings, LEDs sewing light into rain. Rain meets Apliu Street like a technician with good ears. Canvas and corrugate take the lead. LEDs provide the treble. The road supplies a steady, forgiving base. Tarps stitch a ceiling across the electronic stalls, blue, green, striped, each span tuned to a different note. Top panels drum bright. Relaxed ones patter low. Sacks nurse clear almonds of water that release in rounded thups, perfectly spaced, perfectly modest. Light here is practical and patient. LED ropes sew pale threads under the tarp lips. Cube signs breathe sea glass green and tea white. A few old tubes hum the thin halo that rain turns kinder. The market is a cabinet of small futures. Coiled cables like sleeping snakes, trays of adapters, tidy ranks of plugs, chargers and power banks drying to a satin under the weather. Ziploc sleeves over labels turn part numbers into tiny aquariums. Drops swim across barcodes, the numbers sharpening for a heartbeat when a bead draws a clear path, then softening back to suggestion. The percussion changes with every roofline. Where corrugated sheeting begins, rain runs its ribs in bright click scales. Where plastic canopy overlaps canvas, the seam writes singles. Singles, pairs tick, tick. TICK tick then resets. A vendor shakes a tarp, a silver curtain falls. The lane blossoms rings. The tablecloth drinks them, darker by one shade, truer than before. Clips at the corners each hold a bead at exactly the same patience. Wind leans the banner, and all 4 beads let go with a polite metallic tick in quick unison. Underfoot, the curb carries a disciplined stream. Gutter lips, tarp fringes, umbrella hems, all choose downhill. Grates take courteous gulps at intervals you could use for breathing. Gulp, inhale, hush, exhale. A scarlet LED reflection runs the channel, breaks into coins at a seam, and rethreads itself into a ribbon 2 slabs later. Footfalls translate into commas, not exclamation points. Everyone walks at the market's preferred speed, deliberate, unhurried, exact. If you're drifting toward sleep, reduce Apliu to 4 instruments. Tarp drum, high. Corrugate run, mid. Gutter hush, low. LED hum, barely there. Breathe with the low, let the high decorate, and let your attention set itself down. If you're working, take the cross ropes overhead as your outline one clear idea per knot. Glance to the drip line, continue. Tables are weather smart. Anti-static mats glisten like jade. Thin zip phone cases hold neat constellations of beads that march to the rim and choose their moment. A tray of tiny screws becomes stars over graphite. One droplet falls and scatters them into a new sky without moving a thing. On a felt pad, a soldering iron sleeps, cool tonight, its stand wearing a ring of bright droplets like a small crown. From a neighboring stall, a microfan turns under the tarp, its breath a warm, invisible thread that catches rain for a meter and returns it to air. Smells gather and agree, a thread of ozone from a just-tested strip, plastic honest and clean, cardboard darkened to toast. A passing drift of sesame and ginger from a food cart 2 lanes away. The air is 1 degree warmer under each canopy, 1 degree cooler in the lane. When someone lifts a plastic bin, water runs the lip in a tidy spine and falls toke-toke into a crate corner wooden, round, precise. Voices here have their own resistance profile, soft negotiations over a bag of connectors. The tiny, satisfied beep of a waterproof calculator. A laugh that rain edits into texture and folds into the fabric. Words blur at this pace. Only the timing remains. Call, answer, nod. A card reader blinks a slow green. Its beep is modest and complete. A bag passes over the counter and collects a crown of droplets in the instant before the hand shelters it. Look close to any LED panel, and you'll see weather learning electronics. Drops cross the light in little comets. At the lower edge of the diffuser, they queue into a fringe and release together silver silk, then nothing. A translucent demo case turns into a lantern. Its glow repeats in a shallow puddle and trembles when a bead lands dead center. The puddle returns to stillness as if it had been practicing for this exact job. A gust remembers itself and angles the rain. Tarps bow. 100 bright almonds spill in chorus. ZIP ties creak once in a register only the market cares about. Umbrellas tilt in unison. Fabric says hup. The stream reforms. LEDs step down their brightness without complaint, as though the weather had asked politely. 5 seconds later, the air forgets its ambition and everything returns to vertical. If sleep is your aim, halve the palette. Keep only jade, mats, cream, LED, graphite, road. Count 2 gulps at the grate and then forget counting. If focus is your aim, match your paragraph to the zipper. You hear 3 stalls over zip. Start, pause, decide, zip, commit, rest. A stall keeper tests the strip power on light, climbs left to right like a soft sunrise under plastic. Raindrops crossing the points become bright seeds for a heartbeat and then water again. Next door, a tray of sim cutters wears tiny crowns of droplets along each jaw. 1 bead lets go, and the metal answers with a precise miniature bell. A coil of CAT6 unwinds 1 loop. Water walks the spiral and falls into a bucket with the exact same note as before. Repeatable, reassuring. Down by the curb, a thin cable snakes from stall to stall under a shared tarp. Drops collect along the catenary curve and slide to the lowest point, then take turns falling. Watching them is a good method. So is the bucket at the table leg, toke, rest took. So is the little drum a plastic bag performs when a single drop chooses it bright, dignified, brief. We pass a patchwork where old tarps have been mended with thought. At every seam, the drop pattern staggers. Left, right, pause. Left again. Your ear learns the syncopation without effort. A motorcycle noses the lane. Its seat wears a film that releases from the rear as neat beads pat, pat, pat and joins the curb stream. The rider's visor carries a moving constellation that vanishes when the helmet tips under a canopy. The rain continues its tidy arithmetic elsewhere. A child rotates a small LED wand. The wand threads a soft helix of color into drizzle and turns it to smoke. The glow repeats in a puddle. Rings rewrite the helix into coins and back to a line. A cat occupies the dry square under a transformer housing, tail a slow metronome. The seam above produces drops at aristocratic intervals, and the cat declines to be impressed. If you're almost asleep, close to 3 sounds, drum, tarp, tick, clip, hush, road, let the tick count your breath. Let the hush keep the page. Let the drum be decoration. If you're still working, take the bridge of signs overhead neon, tube. Let as your checklist. Choose one task under each kind of light. Finish it by the next canopy seam. The lane opens a fraction near the corner, and the weather changes instruments. Heat murmur slides under the tarps. Steam curls into drizzle. Porcelain speaks in small, exact notes. Street food pockets are close skewers and bowls, and friendly stoves sheltering under canopies that make their own music. We'll turn that way next. For now, one last look across Apliu's ceiling. Ropes, clips, seams, patches, LEDs stitching steady light into rain. A bead at the tarp's lowest point lengthens until it knows itself and falls. Tick hush. The market resets, ready to repeat the kindness for whoever needs it. Rain finds heat and turns kind. The lane bends and opens into little kitchens under canopies, steam drifting out to meet drizzle, oil answering weather with a quiet, happy murmur. Skewers line up like small flags. Ladles tap rims with polite confidence. Chopsticks whisper against enamel. Above, tarps keep their gentle drum. At the edges, thin curtains release in silver combs that vanish before you decide to count. A grill breathes. Fat remembers the pan and gives a soft, persuasive sizzle that the rain rounds down to velvet. On the counter, bottles of soy and vinegar wear neat crowns of droplets. One bead leans, travels the label, and drops to the tray with a wooden tick. The tray is already warm. Each drop lands, hesitates, and becomes a brighter scent rather than a sound. Ginger moves air, scallion follows. Pepper writes a brief, friendly point at the edge of your attention and disappears. Steam has its own choreography. It noses the drip line, curls once around a pole, and agrees to become weather before it touches anything. Under each canopy, the temperature lifts 1 degree. Outside, the rain keeps everything true. Paper cups stack in even towers. Moisture turns the top rim into a gloss that looks like care. A cook wipes a knife and 2 long strokes draw, lift, and the rhythm matches the patter overhead. If you're drifting towards sleep, this is the lullaby register. Tarp drum, soft, pan hush lower, ladle taps, tiny bells. Breathe on the pan's hush and let the rest arrange the room. If you're working, choose 1 microstation per task order at the skewer tray frame. Turn at the ladle tap, decide, plate at the paper cup, commit, then step aside and repeat. A skewer cart clicks its burner higher, the blue line steadies. Rain dots the steel roof and answers the adjustment with a finer pattern. Chicken turns, glaze tightens to satin, and a brush paints it thin. Convincing gloss that beads and falls in slow, exact commas. A hand salts with the confidence of practice. Grains land, melt, and silence returns. Nearby, a pot lid lifts. Steam carries a broth smell bones and patience, and then the lid settles with a felted kiss. Voices live close to shoulders here. Orders are entire conversations in 4 syllables. The replies are gestures, tongs, ladle, nod. A small laugh tries to be a sound, and rain turns it into warmth. A waterproof calculator beeps, once modest, complete. The exchange finishes with the soft hiccup of a contactless reader and a paper bag that collects a crown of droplets in the instant before the hand shelters it. At your feet, the curb keeps its slow river. Canopy fringe, umbrella hem, sign edge dribble choosing downhill. A grate takes regular swallows. Each gulp is a measure you can copy without trying. Rings travel outward from a lost bead, touch a tile, and vanish. If you only watched the reflection, you'd still know everything. Neon becoming wine, the bowl's white becoming cream, a spoon turning into a bright comet crossing a puddle night. We drift to a stall with enamel bowls stacked like moons. A ladle finds the broth's surface and speaks once, round and sure. Oil blinks gold on top, travels to the edge, and draws a perfect ring that rain rewrites into smaller circles as the bowl leaves the counter. Noodles settle with a hush and a sigh. Scallion lands like a green thought. A sheet of nori breathes, softens, agrees to be part of the evening. The eater steps to the shelter's lip, and the bowl becomes a private lantern for 30 seconds. Steam translating into drizzle and back again. If sleep is near, reduce color to 3. Jade, scallion, honey, lamps, graphite, road. Keep only the broth note and the great swallow. Count 1 ladle, 1 gulp, forget numbers. If focus is the aim, hit your paragraph to the skewer turner's metronome, flip, right, brush, read, rest, decide, repeat. Farther in, a steel tray receives dumplings with small, satisfied thunks. The vendor shakes the pan's lip. A clear fringe falls. The dumplings shine like lacquered stones. A squeeze bottle answers with dots of chili that blink red and then settle darker. A plastic stool beaded with rain becomes a table. A bag becomes a placemat. The city practices hospitality with whatever is at hand, and the weather approves. A kettle clicks off hooray in a whisper, and a thermos lid becomes a cup. Tea steam threads into rain, adds a soft tannin to the air, and vanishes. Now soy. Now vinegar. Now ginger again. If you're collecting methods, keep 3. Ladle tap, start, tray tick, checkpoint, great gulp, reset. The canopy edge writes a longer curtain for a moment when the wind remembers itself. 100 bright almonds drop in chorus. Laughter lifts, umbrellas tilt 1 degree, tongues rest for exactly the time it takes to enjoy the weather's joke, and then everything resumes. Clips along a banner each release a bead with a neat metallic tick tiny unison and return to waiting. We pass a grill where squid flowers into shape, char lines clean as sheet music. A brush brings sauce in 2 strokes. The glaze beads, chooses the edge, and falls to the heat with a brief, round syllable. Next door, a congee pot keeps a domestic base-off breath just under boil. A spoon tastes, the cook nods. A handful of scallion becomes weather over porcelain and lands as green punctuation. If you're almost asleep, close the frame to 1 square. Pan, spoon, steam. Let the spoon be in, the steam be out. The pan be the space between. If you're holding attention for work, set the timer to a very human cycle serve. Wipe, breathe, and write 1 small thing per cycle, no more. A final pocket holds skewers like a bouquet, fish balls in satin, tofu with a patient edge, peppers bright under thin rain. A child counts them and finds the number unimportant. The stall's bucket says toke at the canopy's measured fringe. The vendor passes the cup, a hand warms. The city, which is rain, which is food, which is people who know how to stand together under a roof and be kind, continues. The lane narrows again, and heat gives the room back to water. Ahead, the glow drops from kitchen to harbour. We'll slip back toward Tsim Sha Tsui, and the Star Ferry Hall's echoes. Bell notes, window rain, then take the crossing home. Rain escorts us back to the Tsim Sha Tsui ferry halls. The roof lowers its voice to a steady patter. The concourse receives it with calm echo, a room-sized hush that rounds every sound. Green paint deepens to sincerity, cream trim turns to tea. Inside the long windows, the harbour becomes a breathing painting stems of light, trembling into coins and mending themselves as if the water were proofreading the city. The hall carries a friendly acoustics. Footsteps arrive as soft commas. Umbrellas shake to modest applause and stop. A suitcase wheel clicks once at the threshold and learns the room's manners. Wooden benches wear neat beadwork along each slat. Every few seconds, a bead at the lowest edge decides and falls tick small enough to be a thought finishing well. Ceiling fans turn with clerical patience, their blades catching a gloss that slides around the circle like a slow planet. Timetables behind fogged glass wear crowns of droplets. A bead swells to a pearl, draws one clear path down the pane, and for a breath, the root letters sharpen central, minutes, arrows, then the fog mends the line. The bilingual announcer clears its throat to felted notes and speaks in alternating kindness. Words land as weather more than language. Boarding, safety, welcome. The chime between versions is a round bell that paints a circle in the air and folds perfectly into rain. If you're drifting toward sleep, you can keep only 4 instruments here. Roof patter, high. Bench tick, small. Harbour hush, low. Bell note, round. Breathe on the hush. Let the bell be your permission to let go. If you're working, use the hall's columns as your outline, 1 paragraph per column. Glance to the water at each bench tick, continue. At the turnstiles, contactless readers blink courteous green. The beep they give is modest, complete acknowledgement, not applause. Umbrellas fold into bouquets and drip in tidy pairs onto a rubber mat that swallows sound as a kindness. A child presses a palm to the window and leaves a brief constellation that becomes cloud again in seconds. The clock above the gate keeps time the way rain keeps order without argument. We drift to the outer platform. Between pillars, the channel opens like a page. The ferry breathes in place, fenders kissing the pontoon with a soft rubber hush. Ropes hold a straight thought to shore. A gloved hand checks tension with 2 fingers and nods. At the handrail, stainless returns a precise chill. Beads align like disciplined notes. One leans, falls, strikes painted wood with a rounded syllable and becomes harbour. Window frames collect tiny runnels. Watch one thread its way down a mullion, recruit a second, separate without drama at the next joint, and carry on 2 polite thoughts agreeing to differ. Beyond the glass, Central's towers read as ideas made out of light, their edges edited by weather into something kinder than geometry. A ferry whispers past across the mouth of the bay. Its wake reaches us in clean ribs that lift the pontoon by a finger's width and set it back as if the harbour were straightening the furniture. Inside the hall again, echo finds its favorite corners. Under the roof's central ridge, drops gather into a brighter fringe and release together silver almonds, brief and unanimous. Along the skirting, beads march in even files. Every third chooses the fall tick reliable enough to borrow his breath. A vending machine hums a small, steady vowel. Someone selects hot tea. The cup arrives. Steam threads into rain, becomes drizzle, becomes nothing. If sleep is your aim, narrow the frame. Keep the bell, the hush, the tick. Let the rest be decoration. If focus is the aim, let the bell mark starts. The bench tick mark checkpoints. The harbour hush carry the middle. Boarding begins without rush. The gate slides with a felted scrape that belongs more to intention than to metal. Steps cross the gap in measured order heel, hush. Toe each print a darker ellipse that lightens from the edges first, and then the center returns to deck. A stroller wheel taps once on the sill and finds the ferry's grammar. A suitcase handle creaks once and rests. The name on the bow wears rain like polish. Letters read truer when every serif holds a shadow of water. We stand under the covered section where hull becomes boat. The ferry's interior light is domestic creamy coins on varnish, steady halos on painted ribs. Window rain is a conversation we already know. A bead forms, joins a second, threads a clear path that focuses the skyline, then fattens into blur and returns the city to suggestion. At the lower lip of the frame, a bead holds to the very edge of reluctance and releases with a convincing note you feel more than hear. A bell speaks once rounded, persuasive. The rope slackens by exactly the amount needed to mean departing, and not 1 centimeter more. Engines stop from idle to purpose, not louder, just truer. The hall keeps a last echo and becomes pure again. The ferry accepts our weight and becomes the room. If you're nearly asleep, borrow the sequence. Bell, inhale. Engine, hold. Hull hush, exhale. If you're working, map one idea to the space between bow and rope, the next to rope and wake. No one on board will hurry you. We slide away. The pontoon's rubber vowels fade under the harbor's longer breath. Behind the hull keeps time, roof patter, bench tick, raider beep. Ahead, the channel writes us a sentence made of dimples and threads and lamp stems. The ferry tilts a polite degree to meet a wake, lifts, agrees, sets back. The benches answer with tiny, staccato murmurs at their feet, the way furniture speaks when it approves. Inside the cabin, a lifebelt ring wears perfect beads like a crown. One chooses to fall and lands with a miniature bell against brass. A small sign black on cream reads clearer for being damp, each letter carrying a shadow that improves its mood. Across the aisle, a coat on a hook builds its own rainfall at the hem bright. Exact drops until fabric drinks slower, and the fringe becomes a tick every so often, polite as a nod. The windows collect harbour into squares. In one, neon becomes wine and then sea glass as the pane decides how generous to be. In another, the clock tower is a soft amber geometry that slides left and vanishes. A third square holds nothing but water-learning handwriting circles meeting, parting, continuing proof that repetition can be kindness rather than insistence. We lean once more into the open doorway. Outside air is cleaner by a finger's width salt with manners, diesel turned intention. The handrail beads have rearranged themselves. One pair releases in sync tick-tick, rests like a quiet joke. Between uprights, the water holds one long stem of light steady enough to measure breath by. Keep it if you like. Stem, count 4. Ring, count 2. Stem, forget counting. The bell speaks its last syllable for this side of the harbour, not as an ending, but as a seam. People rise with the ferry's rhythm rather than against it. Doors breathe and open. The hall on the island will answer with its own echo roof brighter, bench tick still precise, announcer still kind. We step into it with the rain's grammar in our pockets. Form, fall, hush. For TST, the paragraph closes on a small proof. The window that fogged, cleared, and fogged again. The bench beat that waited longer than the rest and then yielded. The bell that never raised its voice and still arranged the room. The harbour will keep the rest of the sentence while we cross it. Hong Kong lifts pedestrians into weather's second story. The elevated walkways thread from the ferry piers towards Central like careful sentences, glass, steel, glass each span speaking rain in a clear high register. Overhead canopies turn the shower into music you can read, patter at the panes, brighter ticks on mowing caps, a fine brush where water finds the gasket and travels. Below, roads write their wider hush trams ringing persuasion rather than command, buses combing water into lace, taxis pulling long rubies across the sheen and letting the street straighten them again. The first bridge asks for a hand on stainless steel. The rail is cool and exact, beaded in even ranks that decide their futures politely. Singles along straight runs, pairs at a bend tick-tick. Rest. Glass to the right carries thin rivulets that meet, separate, and never argue. Each joint becomes a small decision made well. If you're drifting toward sleep, keep only 3 sounds up here: patter, glass, high, tick, rail, small, hush, road, low. Breathe with the hush. Let patter draw the borders of your attention. Let the tick count without you. If you're working, take one clean thought from post to post. At each pair tick, glance down to the tram lines and continue. A tram slides under a screen, patient bow, a soft ding painted onto rain. Its roof wears a shallow film that chooses the edge of the junction and drops as ordered fringes pat 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 drumming. The curbstones before folding back into the general hush. On Davray Road, headlights braid, Taillights unbraid. Crosswalk beeps arrive kindly rounded. The weight glows softer through damp glass. Umbrellas below rehearse geometry in real time. 1 degree left, 2 right, hup when ribs meet, and the river reforms. The bridge's overhead glazing edits the skyline into moving panes. IFC becomes a lantern of softened verticals. A bank of offices turns into a grid of tea-colored rooms. Far off, the harbor is a graphite breath stitched with lamp stems. Drops cross each pane like small comets. At the lower drip edge, they queue into a silver fringe and release together thin silk, then gone. The drip tray below answers with bell notes that change key as water gathers. Ping, new, pong, fuller, hush, overbrim. Good measures for paragraphing. Underfoot, tread plate speaks a low drum and rain. Footsteps translate to commas. Pauses, sit down, and behave. A cyclist walks a folded bike tires, draw 2 pale commas on metal, and the air erases them 5 paces later. Someone texts beside the pane. Foam light throws a soft rectangle that ripples when a bead lands dead center. The city is a cooperation of small accuracies. Bead to edge, edge to tray to swallow, road to river, and back again. We cross into a second span where wind remembers itself. For 10-12 seconds, the rain writes diagonal wires across the glass. Umbrellas below lean in unanimous agreement. Bus roof pools slide to a new corner and spill in bright sheets that break into beads midair. Our handrail answers with paired ticks, tick-tick, then returns to singles when the air calms. The sentence accepts a comma and carries on. At an elbow, we stop and look down the long perspective. Tram lines are graphite rails stitched with wet light. Each passing car draws a quiet ribbon and leaves it for the rain to mend. On the far curb, planters lift palms into the edge of the frame. Fronds keep 2 instruments, broad blades dropping slow bass notes, ribbed undersides writing a dry whisper under the canopy. A taxi signals, its amber blinking through a sleeve of water on the lens. The blink copies itself into the gutter as neat coins, then becomes a thread again. If sleep is near, reduced to 2 planes. Glass at the shoulder, roads underfoot. Let glass be your inhale patter and road your exhale hush. If focus is your aim, map your task to the signal cycle below. Red, frame the idea. Amber, simplify it. Green, right, then rest 1 rail tick before beginning again. The walkway widens near a landing. Escalators lift people and rain together. Steps hum a small, steady teeth note. The black comb at the foot turns drops into a tiny rain stick. The rubber handrail wears a moving constellation beads, ride your palm, then leap off at the turn with a bright tick. Overhead, a canopy lip releases a thin curtain every 10 seconds. The tray beneath keeps a tidy metronome ping. P-I-N-G, ping, which is all some kinds of work require. Beyond the landing, a breezeway frames a slice of harbor. Ferries move as courteous animals, engines translated by weather into felt more than sound. A bell from the piers arrives rounded, persuasive. The footbridge edits it into the room and hands it back as calm. Between uprights, lamp stems stitch gold onto graphite. A gust frays them into coins and they rethread themselves automatically. You can let your outline behave like that, change, return, remain the same idea improved by movement. The next span crosses above Connaught Road. Buses breathe at the lights. Their roofs carry small observatory skylights holding constellations of beads. Assessee housings braiding rivulets into gutters, brief waterfalls when gears choose go. The road remembers each departure as a darker gloss for 5 seconds, then forgets because rain is a good editor. A minibus glides through, its light box a soft moon. 2 red threads follow and vanish under an overhang. We take the inner line where a joint in the glazing makes micro-theaters. 2 beads race, the smooth glass sprinter, the gasket walker. The sprinter wins and signs its victory with a comet tail. The walker becomes a lens holding the upside-down street, until vibration persuades it to continue. On the sill, 3 droplets refuse to join. Wind leans, they agree, a single bright fall and a bell note precise enough to remember and soft enough to forget. If you're almost asleep, keep only ding, tram, ping, tray, hush, road. Count 1 ding, 1 ping, then let the hush keep time. If you're still with a task, choose 3 spans to close a section start at the bell. Carry on the paired ticks, and if the trays ping, then look once toward the harbour for your reward. Ahead, the walkway bends toward Central Market canopies. Warm air, escalators like rivers of people, drip patterns practiced by decades. The bridge gives one more kindness before we go, a synchronized release along the lip 20 small curtains falling in unison, a collective exhale. I match it with mine and step into the curve, stainless underhand, rain continuing its exact, forgiving grammar. The walkway bends and hands us to Central Market, where rain learns a new instrument. Canopies receive it first broad lips, assigning steady curtains to the threshold, seams releasing pairs and bright, punctual ticks. Inside, the building keeps a weather of its own, a lighter powder high on skylights, a soft echo carried down the atrium, floor sounds rounded into commas instead of footnotes. Umbrellas fold into bouquets at the door, and the lane becomes a room. Warmth rises by a degree. Air smells of wet concrete, fruit skins, a thread of coffee, and the faint sawdust of old wood waking under humidity. Overhead, long skylights turn rain into sheet music. Single drops meet and travel in clear runnels along the ribs. Cue at the lower lip, then release together silver combs that vanish before you choose to count. Each release lands in a narrow tray with a small bell note, pitch changing as the water gathers. Ping, new, pong, fuller, hush, overbrim. Escalators take people and weather up through the atrium. Steps hum a tidy teeth note. At the foot, the black comb turns drops into a miniature rainstick. The rubber handrail wears a moving constellation beads ride your palm, then leap at the turn with a bright tick, becoming part of the building's arithmetic. If you're drifting toward sleep, let the escalator be your breath. Hum, inhale, tick, exhale, hush, rest. If you're working, set 1 small task per landing start at the base, revise at the mezzanine, commit at the top, and use the drip tray ping as checkpoint. Along the canopy edge, tiny chains escort water from lip to jar, each link releasing a quick, precise syllable. Where 2 chains meet a gutter, the line becomes a single voice rounded, even trustworthy. A florist nearby breathes green into the room. Shelf leaves wear perfect crowns of beads that collect and fall without bruising anything. A bucket under the bench answers in wood. Toque, rest. Toque metronome for anyone who needs one. Glass fronts hold their own weather. A patisserie window fogs along the bottom. A hand draws a clear stripe, and the city appears inside the case lamps, umbrellas, a sliver of sky, then the fog nets shut again. In the coffee stall, steam finds rain at the door, curls once and agrees to become drizzle. Porcelain clicks, soft and accurate. A milk pitcher wears a crown of tiny droplets along its rim. 1 bead travels the handle, pauses at the thumb curve, and drops to the tray with a round, contented note. Look up and the drip patterns become maps. Reynolds choose the same grooves they chose yesterday and the day before, are joined by new threads, separate without argument at each glazing bar. At every 3rd rib, a deliberate overflow chooses a spout and writes a brief vertical line through the air clean as a drawn pencil ending in the tray. Spell that migrates from ping to pong to hush as the hour deepens. If sleep is near, keep only 3 instruments, skylight patter, high, tray bell, small, atrium hush, low. Breathe with the low. Let the bell count without you. Let the patter draw the edges of your attention until it sets itself down. Tiles underfoot read as polished graphite, honest and exact. Footsteps turn to commas, heel, hush, toe. At the rail of the internal balcony, Stainless returns its precise chill. Beads line up in patient ranks and choose their moment singles along straight runs, pairs at each curve tick tick. Rest a syncopation you can borrow for writing. Sentence, sentence, breath. Across the void, slow fans make ceremony out of air. Their blades gather a soft gloss that slides around the circle like a tame moon. Stalls keep their weather tidy. A noodle counter breathes steam with a low, satisfied murmur. Water gathers along a sign's lower edge and drops exactly between bowls. A fruit stand turns color truer under rain mango to gold satin, citrus to lacquered sun. Each crate rim carries beads that march to the corner and fall in polite order. Numbers on waterproof price tags sharpen whenever a bead draws a clean path across the plastic, then soften back to suggestion. Micro theaters live in the fittings. At a poster frame, 2 beads race, one sprinting the smooth glass, one strolling the gasket. The sprinter signs its win with a small comet tail. The stroller becomes a lens that holds a whole kiosk upside down, perfectly calm until a vibration persuades it to move on. Down at a floor drain, a thin river of decisions canopy fringe, umbrella hem, chain drip, takes courteous swallows. Rings walk out, touch grout lines, and vanish. If focus is your aim, map your paragraph to the swallow. Frame, before, right, through, glance up, after. A bell note from somewhere above rounds the room, more color than tone, and fits itself into the market S grammar. Patter, ping, hush. On the mezzanine, benches wear thin rows of droplet crowns along their slats. Every few seconds, a bead at the lowest edge yields with a soft tick that feels like permission rather than sound. A child counts the drips until numbers become light. A commuter closes their eyes and lets the escalator do the counting. The building is a conversation between then and now that rain moderates kindly. Old terrazzo edges drink to a deeper shade. New glass edits the view into steady rectangles. Where the atrium narrows, sound gathers curtains of water releasing from a set of scuppers with near unison. Where it widens, the hush takes over and the trays answer singly, like polite calls across a courtyard. You can choose which part to keep. If sleep is close, reduce the scene to 3 words: water, light, stone, and repeat them slower each time until they become one. If you're working, take the landing rhythm as a loop. Step off, task, ping. Step off, task, ping. The market will hold your attention the way it holds its weather gently, exactly, without rush. At the far end, doors open to a covered ramp, and the rain changes instruments again, less bell, more drum. The outside air is cleaner by a finger's width. The handrail beads align to a new cadence. Below, the road remembers itself as ribbons and fringe. Ahead, the Mid-Levels Escalator waits canopy percussion, steady climb, a city traveling uphill at walking speed while rain keeps perfect time. The city puts one hand on your back and says, up. The Mid-Levels Escalator begins like a soft river running uphill roofed in polycarbonate, framed in aluminium, stitched together by landings where streets cross and rain changes instruments. The first sound is canopy percussion, bright taps on ribs, a thinner brush on the flat sheets, a small, regular plank where a drip lip releases into a tray. Beneath it, the escalator keeps its steady hum, the polite teeth, note of steps. The low ribbon of motor's rain translated into mechanism. You put a palm to the moving handrail. It is warm from other hands and stippled with new beads, a moving constellation that rides with you, leaps at the curve and reforms. At the foot, the black cone drinks rain like a tiny rainstick crisp grains as droplets pass through the plastic teeth, then hush. Steps lift, ridges carry the weather upward, and water chooses to travel the grooves or let go in silver commas that vanish before the next landing. The roof's geometry explains itself in sound. Flat spans speak in satin patter. Taut panels give a clearer tick. Overlaps at a soft offbeat where one sheet laps the next tick, 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 syncopation that suits thinking. If you're here for sleep, let the hum be your inhale, the canopy be your exhale, and the small offbeat mark the space where thought loosens. If you're here for work, set one precise idea per span. On the overlap, glance to the city. At the landing, decide a next small step. We pass the first street opening. Rain widens. Air gets cleaner by a finger's width. Below, taxis pull rubies across a gloss that reflects neon down to the curb. A tram bell wanders up from Deva like persuasion rather than command. Shop awnings on either side practice their own percussion canvas singles, vinyl pairs. Corrugate runs, then fold back into the escalator, steady grammar as you re-enter the covered section, and the roof lowers its voice again. Windows at shoulder height keep little theaters. A Che-Chan tang fogs along the panes. A hand draws a square, and the room appears. Formica, steam, a bowl, when fog mends the square. A barber's striped pole turns rain into slow candy. A bakery case glows tea-colored and doubles itself in a shallow sill puddle. The roof lip above each window chooses one exact point to release a bead. You begin to know which note belongs to which shop before you can see it. Mid-Levels is a chain of microclimates. Under a narrow section, the air runs cool and quick, drops fine as thread. Under a wide span, it grows warmer, the patter rounder, the echo gentle. At each joint in the roof, a bead nurses itself to weight and then tick joins gravity. The joint sound maps your ascent, single at the straight runs, pairs at corners, tick-tick. Rest like a helpful metronome reminding your shoulders that up does not mean hurry. A gust remembers itself. For 10 seconds, rain rides diagonal wires across the canopy. The beads on the moving handrail release in synchronized pairs. Umbrellas down on the crossing lean and pass with a small collective hup. The escalator keeps its promise and climbs at exactly the same pace. The gust forgets. The lines return to vertical. The pair ticks go back to singles, and the city approves the edit by carrying on. Landings arrive as rooms of weather. A roof lip throws a thin curtain. A drain answers with a rounded swallow. Crosswalk beeps arrive rounded by water. A minibus folds a soft huff into the hush as wipers clear, then surrender again to fog. On some corners, palms keep 2 instruments, broad leaves dropping bass notes, ribbed undersides drawing a dry whisper under the drum. If you're drifting toward sleep, take one landing as a lullaby loop. Curtain, out, swallow, rest, hum, in. If you're working, make landings your checkpoints. State, simplify, commit. Back under cover, the escapement is audible. Gentle clicks where each step meets the next. The roof's undersides hold tidy lines of condensation. Beads march along aluminium stiffeners, meet at screw heads, and decide in order tick, tick. Tick never in a rush. A poster frame hosts a familiar race. The glass sprinter with a comet tail, the gasket walker that turns into a lens, and holds a whole shop upside down, patient until vibration persuades it to continue. At a mezzanine, the escalator hands you to a side walkway. Here, the canopy steps back and the city comes up to the rail. Balconies bloom with wet plants. Laundry lines wear rain like necklaces. A shrine shelf under an eave glows incense, smoke stitching itself into drizzle. A brass bowl wearing perfect beads and releasing them in notes so soft they count as permission rather than sound. Below, stair streets run like wet veins. Their tiled steps carry precise, bright taps where drops choose edges. Rejoining the main run, you notice time without numbers. How many pairs of ticks since the last landing? How many pings from a tray? How often the Coombs rain stick refills and empties? A child counts until counting becomes listening. Someone in office clothes lets the rail carry their hand and the day off their shoulders. A courier stands still for one span and is moved. Everyone is traveling at the only speed the night allows, deliberate, unhurried, exact. You pass a section where the roof has been patched clear rectangles sewn into older sheets. At each patch seam, the drop pattern staggers, left, right, pause. Left again. Your ear learns it in a heartbeat and offers it to your breath. On the frame, 3 droplets refuse to join. Wind leans. They agree. A single bright fall. A bell ping in the tray below that changes key as levels rise. Ping, new, pong, steady, hush, overbrim. Good measures for paragraphing. Smell edits itself with altitude. Down at street crossings, sesame, ginger, wet tire. Up here, wet dust turned to clean stone, the faint sugar of fruit skins from a stall on a side stair, coffee softening into air. Somewhere behind a panel, a small blower keeps a friendly vowel, rounding edges, warming air by 1 degree under the roof so rain can perform without making demands. If sleep is near, reduce the whole climb to 3 sounds, hum, patter, ping. Hum on the steps, patter on the roof, ping in the tray. Inhale, hum, exhale, patter, rest, ping. If focus is the aim, choose 3 spans and close your section there. Start on a single tick run, carry through the pair tick bend. End at a landing with 1 tray pang before you look out and let your eyes rest on wet tile below. The escalator crosses another open slice. Soho leans into view lanterns dim to kindness, tiles darken to sincerity, stair lanes practicing their own punctuation under awnings. A warning chime sounds once rounded, not sharp, and rain wraps it in felt before handing it back to the air. Handrail beads travel with your palm and leap again at the turn bright tick, and the city's sentence climbs on. Near the top of this segment, the canopy gives a small gift, a synchronized fringe release along a long lip 20 thin curtains letting go in unison, the sound like a communal exhale. People smile without needing a reason. You match it with your breath. In on the hum, out on the fringe, stillness on the tray's last ping. The pace eases into a crown of landings where streets branch toward bars and stair cuts. The percussion shifts from polycarbonate to tile and lantern. Our route leans right, away from the long machine and into the Soho stairs and Tai Kwun treads glazed by rain. Handrails carrying clean beadwork, courtyards breathing stone and soft and light. For a moment, stay with the escalator's promise. It will keep lifting people at walking speed long after we step away. Then carry its rhythm onto the steps. Hum becomes footfall. Patter becomes lantern hush. Ping becomes the tiny bell a drop makes on brass. The escalator lets go and the city changes from glide to steps. Soho's lanes tilt upward in narrow strokes, stone, tile, handrail, each surface learning rain with its own accent. Under a string of lanterns, the color turns delicate, crimson softened to tea red. Warm whites glow like paper held to a lamp. The hush here is made of small things, beads on brass, taps on tile, the brief whisper where water finds a carved letter and traces it. Pottinger-like stairs lay their grammar underfoot, broad stone slabs with shallow lips where decades have taught water to travel. Drops choose edges and write a scale tick along one groove. Small leap to the next, a round note where the run meets a drain set flush into the tread. Rubber solace returns soft commas. Leather gives a brighter syllable and then lends the lane's manners. If you're drifting toward sleep, borrow the stairs cadence. Step inhale, bead, exhale, real tick, rest. If you're working, set 1 small line of thought per landing and let every drain swallow be your checkpoint. A balcony spills a fringe of potted greens into the frame basil darkened to sincerity. Fern ribs holding silver rows of drops like careful stitches. Their beads release in orderly turns to the stair below and vanish into the larger hush. Above, lantern strings keep a low, friendly hum light that edits itself on wet air rather than insisting. When a gust remembers itself, the line lifts and settles together. A handful of drops jump from tassels and land on the handrail with punctual clicks, tiny bells that count breath without demanding attention. We turn into a side alley where rain becomes a finer instrument. Tiled risers speak in precise taps. A copper downpipe plays a round, wooden syllable at its elbow. An eave drip releases crystal singles that choose a bucket with a discreet toque. Toque. A kitchen door breathes sesame and ginger into the lane. Steam noses the drip line, twirls once around a sign bracket, and becomes weather before it touches anything. From a high window, a stripe of warm interior falls across wet tile and doubles in the puddle at the landing. 2 rectangles, 1 world. The handrails carry honest beadwork. Stainless returns a cool exactness. Brass wears a deeper glow, beads lining the underside like patient notes, singles along straight runs, pairs where the stair bends tick-tick. Rest, you can copy that. Sentence, sentence, breath. On the wall, a small plaque darkens, letters reading clearer for their water shadows. A drop stalls at the bottom serif of a name as if making up its mind, then lets go with a note soft enough to count as permission. Ahead, Tai Kwun announces itself without volume. A gateway frames a courtyard where stone, brick, and glass agree on patience. Rain threads the granite in lucid lines. Gutters draw quiet curtains from carved lips. Eaves give singles, then pairs, then rest. The compound's old brick drinks to velvet. Mortar joints guide water like lines ruled on paper. Under a gallery, timber beams hold tidy crowns of droplets. Every few seconds, one chooses the fall, and the wood answers with a round domestic knock. Courtyards make good rooms for this weather. Sound travels in circles here, patter lifted from the roofs, returned by the flagstones, softened by air. Footsteps become commas again. The voice of a guide somewhere becomes texture, turned kinder by rain. A camera shutter writes a small felted syllable and stops. If sleep is near, reduce the scene to 3 truths: water, light, stone. If focus is your aim, choose the arcade's columns as milestones, 1 idea per bay. Look out to the open square on the beads tick, continue. Glass galleries keep their own window rain. Beads pull clear paths down panes and briefly sharpen the view. A stair, a lamp, a corner of sky. The path loosens, the pane fogs a shade. The world returns to suggestion. Inside, a guard's desk glows tea-colored. The light repeats in a shallow puddle that trembles once when a drop lands in its exact center and then steadies. The puddle is an observatory sky downward, lantern upward, you passing as a gentle comet. No need to catalog. We drift along the upper deck. Railings here are cooler, newly rinsed. From under an eave, a chain of small cups escorts water to a jar plink, plink quick notes tamed by the jar's low vowel. At one corner, a copper gutter drops a thin sheet into a stone lip, and the landing note changes key as the basin fills, ping new, pong, fuller, hush, almost over. Good measures for paragraphing, good measures for breath. Tai Kwun's thresholds are small gifts. A step up, tile taps to wood hush. A step down, wood returns the room to stone. At each seam, rain revises its handwriting that keeps meaning. Brass door furniture wears perfect beads like a crown that never spills. One bead lets go and rings a tiny bell against the plate. The sound is so polite you register it as consent rather than surprise. If you're counting toward sleep, count arches, 3 on the near side, 3 beyond, and forget the number when the jar says hush. If you're carrying a task, map your section to the arcade rhythm. Under roof, frame. Across open square, decide. Under roof, right. Let the courtyard patrol your pace as a very kind editor. A gallery panel explains history in quiet sentences. Rain translates it. Dates read truer underwater. Names keep better company with time when every serif holds a shadow. The air here is warmer by a degree beneath the eaves, cooler by a degree in the open square. Somewhere a kettle clicks and sighs in a staff room. Steam threads a doorway and becomes drizzle. The compound absorbs the update and returns to being itself. We pass beneath a stair tower where the spiral gathers its own weather drops, running the handrail like beads on a wire. Singles at the treads, an occasional pair from the eye. Looking up, Lanterns draw concentric moons in the damp air. Looking down, flagstones present clean ovals of light and a thin river that chooses the same drain every time, order that never feels strict. As we leave the second courtyard, rain writes one more gentle flourish across the open brick. A gust lifts the lanterns by a finger's width and sets them down together. People smile without deciding to. You can match it. Inhale on the lift, exhale on the settle, rest on the bead that takes its time and falls. The lane beyond narrows, roofs step back, and the temple district leans into view. Incense smoke will meet drizzle and draw lines through the air. Brass will wear crowns of perfect droplets. A row of shop awnings will speak in canvas and corrugate again. We'll follow the slope toward Manmo Temple and Sheung one incense rain and dried seafood awnings, keeping Tai Kwun's calm grammar in our pockets. Water taught to behave, light taught to be kind, stone remembering how to listen. The wane tilts and the city's voice changes key. Manmo Temple arrives like a paw's green tiles rinsed to jade, red pillars darken to velvet, eaves writing neat curtains from carved lips. We stay at the threshold where rain becomes thin thread and incense finds weather. Smoke rises in soft ropes from inside and steps out to meet drizzle. The two greet each other like relatives, braid once, and relax into air. Under the roof edge, brass fittings keep their own small astronomy, perfect droplets along the doorplate, beads gathering at the rim of donation bowl, a pendulum chain that decides every half minute to release one bright note. The floor stones carry lucid runnels that choose the same grooves the way memory chooses the same stories left of the threshold. Under the lintel, away to the quiet drain by the lion. Each time a drop lands on the bronze finial at the stair, it rings a miniature bell you feel more than hear. Lanterns hang low in tidy ranks, their reds turn tea-warm by weather. Tassels collect rain and release in threaded pairs tick. Rest a gentle syncopation you can borrow. Sentence, sentence, breath. Inside, coils burn in slow spirals above prayers, but from here we keep only their scent. Sandalwood soft by rain, old wood given a new page. The smell edits time kindly. Numbers turn to events, events turn to patience. If you're drifting toward sleep, reduce the scene to three truths: tile, jade, pillar, red, smoke, silver. Inhale at the door as incense threads out. Exhale at the eave as rain threads down. Rest on the tiny bell the finial makes. If you're working, take the columns as milestones, one clear thought per pillar. Glance at the runnels, continue. A. Caretaker lifts a ladle and tips rain from a stone lip back into the jar palm, a rounded note that changes key as the level drops. A broom writes water away from the threshold in long, even strokes. The strokes match the drip's patience. Draw, lift. Draw, lift. A visitor's umbrella shakes once outside the gate. Beads travel the rib to the hem and fall in a silver fringe that vanishes before you decide to count. The temple steps down to Hollywood Road. Then the slope leads toward Sheung, where awnings multiply and the air takes on a briny chord. Dried seafood streets meet rain with canvas, corrugate, and plastic curtains that mouth hello each time someone moves through. The scent is precise. Sea turned to pantry salt, sun, a whisper of tide now rounded by weather until it sits like a friendly vowel in the lane. Shops are tidy, practical feeders. Jars line shelves, sea cucumbers like dark commas, scallops like pale coins, fish maw like curls of paper light. Beads arrange on the glass and pull clear paths down labels. Characters sharpen for a breath, then soften as condensation knits again. On the counters, scales speak in bright, exact syllables. A waterproof calculator answers with a modest beep. A roll of plastic bags clicks its teeth and becomes a metronome for 6 seconds before quiet returns. Awnings parcel the rain into rhythms, vinyl lips and singles. Corrugate ribs run quick scales. Canvas seams release pairs with a punctual tick-tick that lands on the cardboard box corners like a tiny drum. where a tarp sags between cords, an almond of water grows patient, then lets go in one rounded thump. The sound instantly absorbed by sacks of rice and coils of rope stacked like dry islands in a wet world. Along the curb, a thin river gathers from hem drips and awning edges, and grates take polite gulps at a pace you could borrow for breathing. If you're drifting towards sleep, keep only 4 instruments here: awning patter, mid, scale ping, small, curb hush, low, incense thread, memory. Breathe with the hush. Let scale pings and patter decorate without claiming attention. Let the incense be a ribbon through the air that ties the street to the temple. If you're working, use awning seams as paragraph marks to start at one, finish at the next, glance at the jars for your checkpoint. Plastic strip curtains turn shoppers into silhouettes that blur and sharpen as beads fall, and part every person a small lantern for 2 seconds. A dehumidifier hums at ankle height, its little reservoir wearing a crown of droplets that line up and fall in orderly turns toque. Tai Kwun, round, reliable. Further in, fans turn at a modest pace, moving the bride note gently toward the door where rain edits it into weather. Displays learn rain kindly. Net bags of anchovies shine like threads of pewter. Squids in crimson wrappers wear small constellations that march to the edge and choose the fall. Starfish stand at attention, beads perched on their ridges like careful buttons. A clerk shakes a plastic scoop. A silver curtain falls into the bin. Rings travel and stop at the first dry edge with courtly manners. Money is counted with cloth in the fingers. Coins sound like leather. The till closes with a soft persuasion rather than a clap. Above, signage breathes in sea glass colors. Neon's magentas become wine dark. Greens settle into jade. LEDs lower themselves one shade, as if the rain had reminded them of their audience. The colors copy into the puddles and then into the curb channel, where a taxi ribbon turns into rubies, beads at an asphalt seam, and links back into a straight thread. The street approves of good handwriting. The weather provides the pen. We step aside for a dolly that whispers, hush hush, across the gloss. Wheels cross a shallow puddle and turn a lamp coin into a perfect target for a heartbeat. Rings walk out, touch crate feet, and vanish. On a low stool, a cat edits the evening with the slow metronome of its tail. Beads form along the awning seam above its throne at aristocratic intervals, and the cat declines to be impressed. A customer's umbrella leans against the wall, dripping a private cadence left rib. Right rib rests that the lane absorbs without comment. If sleep is near, reduce colors to 3 jade, sighing, amber, lamp, graphite, road, and keep only the toque of the dehumidifier and the gulp of the grape. If focus is your job, match your line to the pear tick of the awning seam, draft, decide, write, breathe. The street will hold your pace the way the racks hold jars upright, visible, unhurried. At a corner, rain rehearses a new trick. A second-story gutter chain escorts water cup to cup plink into a waiting jar whose note deepens as it fills. You can hear the key change across 2 shop fronts. A clerk wipes the inside of a window. For a breath, the world climbs inside, the red tassel, the jar, the curve of the scoop, and then fog mends the pain. Across the lane, a brass bowl catches a few beads from a shrine shelf and answers with a note so kind it counts as permission rather than sound. We wander toward the tram spine beyond, where rails shine like wet graphite and the city's sentence becomes 2 lines and a bell. The dried seafood scent fades to an outline. Incense lingers a corridor behind us, threading the air between awning and eave. The rain keeps its grammar, adjusting instruments as requested. One last look back, jars like small lighthouses, chords like staff lines, awnings spelling the weather in a language every shop understands. A bead swells at the tarp's lowest point, knows itself, and falls tick, hush. The lane resets. Ahead, Deva Road gathers the tram lines and the ding ding glow, and beyond them, the walkway that returns us gently to the harbor and its steady, generous black. Rain lays a clean gloss over Deva Road, and the city speaks in two bright syllables, ding ding. Tram lines run like graphite rollers stitched with light. Wheels hum a soft metal ribbon that rain rounds into kindness. A car slides past green, patient, and its bell paints a circle in the air that folds perfectly into the weather. Wipers cross the front window with a single felted huff. Clearing a letterbox the fog immediately begins to reclaim. At the stop, a narrow canopy gives the rain its assignment steady singles along the lip, a brief fringe when a bead line chooses to fall together. The shelter's clear panels wear marching drops that translate route numbers as they pass. Sharp, blur, sharp. A card reader blinks a courteous green. The beep it gives is modest, complete. Passengers become silhouettes, then people, then silhouettes again, as umbrellas tilt and correct in the choreography this street learned long ago. If you're drifting toward sleep, keep only 3 instruments here: bell, round, rail, soft metal, road, low hush. Breathe on the hush, let the bell count without you. Let the rail sing the edges of your attention until it sets itself down. If you're working, give yourself one small thought per stop frame it at the shelter. Carry it between posts, close it at the ding. Tram roofs hold shallow pools that the motion persuades to choose corners. At each start, a night fringe releases pat 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 and drums a brief tambourine along the curb before joining the general hush. Overhead wires wear beads at every hanger. When a gust remembers itself, the beads leap together like a silver stave made sound, then return to patience. The trolley pole sketches a tiny spray where it meets the wet wire. The spray exists, dazzles, and is gone, as if the current preferred magic to display. Crosswalk signals change with unhurried authority jade. Tea, wine, and each color lays a page across the street that rain reads in tidies. Weight glows behind damp glass. The beeper's dots arrive rounded by weather. Umbrella rivers form for 8 heartbeats, then thin to threads that choose alleys and doorways. A taxi pulls 2 rubies across the tracks. At a crown in the asphalt, they beat into coins, then lengthen back into lines the street accepts with a nod. We take the raised walkway again, glass to one side, trams beneath, and let the scene simplify from above. Bells drift up as persuasion. The tracks stitch and unstitch reflections. Buses comb water into lace and leave it to mend. On the pane beside us, drops become small comets and queue at the lower edge. The tray answers with bell modes that change key as levels gather. Ping, new, pong, steadier, hush, overbrim. Good measures for paragraphing. Better measures for breath. The road remembers each departure as a darker gloss for 5 seconds, then forgets because rain is a good editor. Planters lift palms into the edge of the frame-broad leaves, dropping slow bass notes. Ribbed undersides writing a dry whisper under the drum. A minibus glides through, light box a soft moon. 2 red threads follow and vanish under the overhang. From this height, the choreography writes itself into water and erases itself at the curb. Proof that repetition can be kindness rather than insistence. If sleep is near, reduce the palette to 3. Jade, signals, honey, lamps, graphite, tracks. Keep only ding, hush, and let numbers dissolve. If focus is your aim, map your last page to 1 full signal cycle. Red, frame, amber, simplify, green, right, rest, rail tick. We angle toward the harbor, the air cleaner by a finger's width with every span. Ferries breathe as courteous animals. Their wakes unroll as neat ribs that lift the piers by a finger's width and set them back. The bell from a distant boat paints its round tone onto the rain and disappears into fabric. Between uprights, lamp stems stitch gold into graphite. A gust frays them into coins. They rethread themselves without drama. The city agrees to become water again. Steps return us to ground and the boards of Central Ferry Piers. Stainless rails give back a precise chill. Beadwork aligned like patient punctuation. Singles along the straight runs, pairs of the curved tick-tick. Rest a metronome you can borrow for anything. Under the roof, the rain keeps its smaller handwriting. Beyond the pillars, the harbor keeps its long vowel. We choose a frame and hold it. Static harbor closing, Central Piers. We stop moving. The camera does not breathe so that you can. Foreground, rail, beaded in even ranks. Midground, a patient lamppost and the soft geometry of green and cream. Background, island lights turned to kindness by weather. Lamp stems stitched onto the harbor, fraying into coins whenever a wake arrives and returning to threads as the water mends itself. Listen to the hierarchy of small truths. Closest the tick when a bead decides and finds painted wood. Mid the hiss where rain lands on open water and on the roof edge's thin curtain. Underneath, the harbor's low, even vowel, a sound that claims no attention and holds all of it when you let it. Hold long enough and you hear the room is timekeeping, the trays ping migrating to pong and then to a polite hush. The rope's fabric whisper where it thinks out loud. The far bell returning like a memory. Light does its work without asking for credit, copying itself into the channel and letting rain edit the edges truer than the originals. If you're here to sleep, use the Piers clock and forget numbers. Bead, inhale, hush, exhale, bell, rest. If you're here to work, give each lamp stem a sentence. Start in one oval, finish in the next. Look down once at the water's ladder before you continue. Either way, the harbor will keep time. The rain will keep language. The pier will keep the room. A gull crosses the frame and shakes a silver handful from its feathers' brief constellation, gone. The rail releases a bee that has waited longer than the others tick precise as a period. Across the channel, a ferry draws a soft comb into the surface. Pearls appear. Lines return. The air cools by a finger's width. The night agrees. We let the picture darken by degrees rather than by decision. Lamps keep their halos a while longer. Rain keeps its handwriting. Water keeps its vowel. Everything else steps back. Keep only 3 words and speak them slower each time until they become one. Water, light, stone. Or, for this harbor, water, light, steel. When you're ready, eyes closing or work nearing done, the frame will release itself without flourish. Until then, we stay. Tick, hiss slow. Thread, coins, thread. Hong Kong in rain at walking speed with room enough for breathing.